Your mind isn't just a container for thoughts. It's an instrument, a translator, a signal chamber of extraordinary design, and it's been speaking to you in code since the very beginning. But most people mistake the echo for the voice. They take the noise for the message. They build entire lives on misreadings of their own internal architecture, confusing patterns for purpose and loops for direction. There is a deeper language beneath all of this. It's not verbal. It isn't taught in schools. And yet, it guides your choices, arranges your emotions, and scripts the architecture of your relationships, dreams, and inner landscapes. This language doesn't speak in words. It speaks in symbol, resonance, attention, memory, texture, spatial tone, and emotional sequence. This is what we call dimensional literacy. To be dimensionally literate is to see how thought and emotion don't just happen inside you, they shape the way reality arrives. It is the ability to read the invisible architecture around and within you, the subtle forces forming your decisions, perceptions, reactions, and sense of self. Thought is not random. Emotion is not just reaction. Identity is not fixed. Reality is not neutral. When you become literate in these deeper languages, everything changes. You begin to notice how your perception bends time. You sense how emotional fields rearrange rooms before a word is spoken. You recognize that even your confusion is patterned. Even your fear has syntax. In this masterclass, we're not chasing theories. We're not layering more concepts onto an already noisy mental field. We're doing something far more essential. We are decoding the hidden language that was always there, the one beneath your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs, your perceptions. You'll learn to see your internal world not as chaos to control or logic to decipher, but as architecture. You'll learn how to read emotional syntax, how to trace symbolic signals, how to track resonance loops that have kept your timeline in repetition. You'll start to perceive time not as a straight line, but as a layered medium, bendable through thought shape and emotional design. You'll learn how to listen not just with your ears, but with your attention field, not just with logic, but with spatial awareness, not just through meaning, but through signal tone. Across this masterclass, we will travel through 5 deep explorations, the invisible foundations of thought, space, and feeling, the subtle systems and inner structures running beneath behavior, experiential techniques for recalibrating your attention, symbolic integration and nonlinear identity design, and finally, mastery tools to live as a coherent, multidimensional signal in a fragmented world. This is not a philosophy. This is not performance. This is design through awareness. And it begins by learning to read what is already shaping you. There is a door. And beneath that door, there's another. You've been walking through rooms you didn't know you built. Now, it's time to read the blueprint. Let's begin. Everything you've ever felt is a language, and you were born fluent. There's a structure behind every emotion you've ever had. Not the story, not the content, not the trigger or the memory or the event, but the underlying syntax, the sequence, the architecture of how that emotion entered, moved, shaped, and sequenced you. People often confuse emotion for chaos, something that erupts and overwhelms. But emotion is not chaos. Emotion is coded geometry. It is feeling wrapped in pattern, intention wrapped in direction. Every emotional wave you've experienced has followed a structure, even if you couldn't see it. Now here's where it gets deeper. The emotional syntax you inherited early in life didn't just describe your experience. It started defining it. It became the hidden script that shaped your perception of time, safety, desire, meaning, and identity. It became a lens that builds lenses. But here's the twist. That script, it wasn't written by your core signal. It was shaped by resonance patterns you absorbed. From family, culture, unspoken rules, early imprints. You were fluent in your emotional language before you ever spoke a word. But that fluency was filtered. And unless we learn to read the architecture beneath those filters, we mistake the walls for windows. So what do? We start at the point before language, before logic, before interpretation. We start at the threshold of signal, that first interior echo that forms before thought becomes sentence. This is the door beneath the door. Let's pause here. Right now, feel your attention. Not what it's focused on, just the texture of your attention itself. Is it sharp, blurry, heavy, wide, narrow? That texture is a dimensional reading. You are already reading something invisible. You are already fluent. You just never learned how to parse the signal. Because no one told you that attention has shape. That emotion has geometry. That thought has directional velocity and symbolic echo. Every thought you think is formed by layers of influence you didn't consciously authorize. And that influence doesn't speak English. It speaks sequence. It speaks form. It speaks through resonant frequency. Now, this is where we begin to learn. To read the layers of our own system, we must look at feeling not as reaction, but as syntax. Not as feedback, but as blueprint. Ask yourself, how do my emotions move? Do they loop or rise? Do they descend or fragment? Do they pulse in place or scan through memory? This is not just analysis. It's dimensional literacy. You're not trying to understand your feelings, you're trying to read their structure. Because once you can read the structure, you can change the architecture. This isn't about suppression or management. This is about design. Let's go one layer further. Every timeline of your life has been shaped by emotional syntax. When you shift that syntax, you don't just feel different, you perceive different. You decide different. You access new dimensional coordinates of self. And those coordinates unlock doors you didn't know were closed. That's the hidden gift of emotional fluency. It opens timelines. It shifts spatial design. It reveals the room behind the room, the thought before the thought, the door beneath the door. In this exploration, you're not just learning to feel. You're learning to read. And through that reading, you'll reshape your internal world at its architectural core. Next, we will trace what thought looks like before it becomes a thought. The raw geometry of cognition, the silent formation of mental shape before language enters. Let's keep moving, exploring pre-thought signals, image seeds, and the raw geometry of cognition. Before language arrives, before you name the sensation, before any internal sentence forms, something else happens. A flicker, a shape, a gesture in awareness. Most people never notice this phase because it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with meaning. It comes as a spatial shift, a prelinguistic imprint. You are having thoughts long before you think them. And those early phase structures carry more influence than the words that follow. This is the pre-thought field. It's where perception is born. Here's the key. Thought doesn't begin as words. Thought begins as formless form, image seeds, spatial pulses, symbolic shapes. Think of it like this: your inner world is not a sequence of typed lines. It's a dynamic spatial sculpture, changing form depending on what you give it permission to shape. This pre-thought signal is not vague. It's architectural. It's the purest expression of how you are organizing your consciousness in real time. Let's take a closer look. When something triggers you, you may believe you're reacting to what was said. But what you're actually responding to is the spatial code you already assigned to that stimulus, long before it reached language. You're reacting to an imprint, not an event. To an internal geometry, not an external fact. That means the structure of your awareness is forming your thoughts before you're aware of them. Pause for a moment. Notice the atmosphere around your current awareness. Not the thought, not the emotion, just the atmosphere. Is it tight? Is it loose? Is it grounded? Unstable? Sharp? Still? That texture, that's a dimensional clue. That's what thought feels like before it gets dressed in content. And that's the layer we must learn to read. Every thought you've ever had passed through this invisible membrane. Each time, it inherited qualities from the spatial field it emerged from. This is the unseen bias behind every belief you've formed, the shaping layer beneath the message. So if you want to read thoughts accurately, you can't just interpret the content. You must learn to feel the geometry that created it. Geometry here doesn't mean math or angles. It means the shape of inner attention, the flow pattern behind awareness. For example, a spiraling pattern often produces obsessive loops. A fragmented pattern can generate disjointed thinking or reactive bursts. A compressed or flat field tends to produce apathy or emotional numbness. A radiating pattern gives rise to insight, coherence, and calm urgency. These patterns are not conscious choices. They are habitual architectures. They form based on memory, identity, and sensory bias, and they're usually invisible until you learn how to feel them. Now consider this. Each time a thought appears, it's not just a random sentence. It's a structure that holds a trajectory. Your thoughts don't just describe the world. They aim your perception. They define the angle from which you will experience the next moment. That aim happens in the pre-thought layer where internal direction is set. When you learn to detect that aim, you no longer follow thoughts blindly. You read their architectural intent before they fully form. This is crucial. It's how you stop being a passenger in your own perception. Let's break it down into a simple practice. Before your next thought completes, pause and trace the field behind it. You may notice a visual flash. You may sense a tilt, a weight, a movement, a distance. That's the pre-thought geometry. And once you can read that, you can reshape the field itself. Doing this consistently changes the entire arc of mental life. It interrupts reflex loops. It decodes inherited bias. It allows you to feel the mind as architecture, not narration. This is dimensional literacy at one of its most powerful layers, cognition before concept. You're not learning to think better. You're learning to read the space before thought so you can sculpt it consciously. Next, we'll explore how your emotional topography, your internal map, was formed, and who or what has been quietly drawing it. Your internal map is real, but who drew it? Every person walks through life with a map, but almost no one realizes they're carrying it. It's not made of roads. It's not labeled with cities or countries. This map is made of emotional terrain, memory clusters, spatial narratives, and symbolic coordinates. It tells you where you feel safe, where you avoid, where you collapse, where you expand, where you feel invisible or powerful or incomplete. This map isn't imaginary. It's structural. It determines the way you walk into rooms, make decisions, handle intimacy, react to silence, interpret praise, receive beauty. You follow this internal geography automatically. And here's the part most never notice. You didn't design most of it. Your early experiences, parental models, childhood emotional logic, they shaped your map before you had the ability to question it. You were handed coordinates for danger, closeness, identity, even reality itself. And those coordinates became your normal. If love was conditional, you may now associate closeness with tension. If expression was unsafe, your map likely points away from openness and toward suppression. If certainty was prized over curiosity, your map may mark the unknown as emotional risk. These are not just behaviors. They are geographic imprints in your inner terrain. Now, why does this matter? Because your current perception of reality isn't neutral. It's being filtered through the topography of that unseen map. You aren't just reacting to life as it happens. You're navigating based on pre-marked emotional pathways, most of which you didn't choose. Dimensional literacy means learning to read this terrain with precision. It means asking, where do I keep returning, not physically but emotionally? What are the familiar loops that shape my reactions? Which areas of life feel wide and open, and which feel foggy or dense? Where is my attention restricted, not because of logic, but because of internal climate? These questions reveal landmarks on your emotional map. They help you see that your sense of possibility isn't determined by facts. It's shaped by the coordinates you've been using. Now let's add another layer. Your internal map doesn't just describe where you are. It predicts where you'll go. It nudges you toward familiar zones, even if they're limiting. Why? Because familiarity feels safe to the system, even when it's painful. So unless that map is made visible, you will live inside prescripted loops, repeating narratives disguised as choices. This is why change feels impossible for so many people. They think they need more discipline or motivation. What they actually need is cartographic revision, a remapping of their inner geography. You can't walk a new path on a map you can't see. Here's the key insight. Mapping is not metaphor. It's functional. Your nervous system literally arranges reality based on directional cues. That means you can create new emotional pathways by consciously placing new markers, symbols, gestures, phrases, sensory associations into your attention field. But first, the original terrain must be seen, named, read, not judged, just recognized. That recognition begins now. Feel into your current moment. Trace the feeling of your inner space. Where are the open doors? Where are the locked ones? Which areas of your life feel known, and which feel unreachable? This reading is your map revealing itself. And once you see it clearly, you're no longer bound by its invisible logic. You begin to redesign the terrain with awareness, with symbol, with new spatial anchoring. Next, we will tune into the force that's shaping that map moment by moment. Your attention, not as focus, but as spatial architecture. Attention is not focus. It is not a tool you simply aim at what's important. It is not the spotlight of the mind. It is the weather system of perception. The way you pay attention is not just shaping what you notice. It's shaping what you become. Each moment, your attention acts like a sculptor, silently forming emotional space, carving meaning into signal, bending time, rearranging perception. Attention is not passive, creates. It is the invisible conductor orchestrating how information becomes identity. But here's the piece most people miss. Attention has texture. It has weight, velocity, dimension, tone. And when you don't know how to read its qualities, you become trapped inside its fluctuations. Let's bring this into sharp relief. Think about a moment where you were anxious. Not the content, the feeling of attention itself. It was probably sharp, scattered, narrow, high-pitched. That is frequency shape. That is how attention behaves when it's moving through uncertainty. Now contrast that with a moment of creative absorption. Time slowed. Your awareness softened. The edges of your focus blurred. Your attention expanded. You weren't trying. You were inside a different architecture. This is the symphonic layer of attention, where spatial, sensory, and emotional fields merge into one shaping force. And if you can learn to read it, you can retune it. Every person has a default attention pattern. Some scatter. Some collapse inward. Some stretch too far and lose center. Some fixate and lock the field. These are not flaws. They are frequency habits, and they can be rewritten. To begin, we must unhook from the idea that attention is mental. Attention is relational. It is the way you hold experience in your field. It's the tone with which you wrap the moment. And that tone either constricts or expands your access to deeper layers of self. Let's go deeper. Attention is also directional. It doesn't just look at things, points through them. It moves through layers of subtle space, following invisible emotional codes. Example, when you're around someone you mistrust, your attention doesn't just land on them. It begins mapping microsignals. It splinters into protection shapes. It wraps around perception like armor. You're not thinking this. Your attention is sculpting it. That sculpting changes your thoughts, changes your breathing, changes the entire chemistry of the moment. That's how powerful it is. So when you change how you pay attention, you change how space itself forms around you. And that's not poetic language, it's structural. Let's trace this in real time. Right now, soften the front of your attention. Not your focus, your field. Let the area just in front of your thoughts become more porous. Now, sense into the edges of your awareness, left, right, up, down. Feel how your attention shapes your emotional climate. The tone of the space around you has changed. That is attention not as tool, but as frequency medium. And this is where dimensional literacy unlocks something extraordinary. Because once you can feel attention as tone, shape, velocity, and direction, you stop using it unconsciously. You begin to conduct it like sound. You begin to sculpt form with it. You begin to tune it like an instrument. And that tuning changes what enters your life, because what enters your life is routed through how you hold space. This is why people with identical circumstances have wildly different experiences. It's not luck. It's not attitude. It's the geometry of their attention field. Now let's expand this concept even further. Attention carries invitation. Whatever you give sustained, emotionally coherent attention to begins to take root in your narrative field. It gathers shape. It builds momentum. It moves from thought to form to identity. So your attention doesn't just perceive reality. It selects which version of reality will gain enough signal to become your baseline. This is not about positivity. It's about precision, about how you tune the instrument of perception. Each time you feel overwhelmed, fractured, stuck, ask, what shape is my attention right now? Where is it pointing? What tone is it vibrating at? What climate is it producing? These questions are not rhetorical. They're diagnostic. They help you read the frequency scaffolding you're operating within so you can shift it at the root. And this is where mastery begins. Because once you can shift the symphonics of your attention, you can rewrite the tempo of your emotional loops. You can change how time feels. You can reshape memory fields, soften trauma pathways, expand perception into subtle layers. And all of this begins with one awareness. Attention is the architect, and you are the conductor. Next, we will meet one of the most deceptive players in the internal system, the mental echo that impersonates your voice. Not every voice in your mind is yours. Not every thought is born from your signal. Some thoughts are resonance recordings, echoes of conditioning, habit, trauma, or inherited scripts. And the most convincing of these is the echo that thinks it's the voice. Sounds like you, feels internal. It often matches your tone, your vocabulary, your narrative habits. But it didn't originate from your present signal. It's a phantom structure, built from the memory of moments when you lost access to your core. This echo is not malicious. It's protective. It was formed during a time when your nervous system needed predictability. So it looped a thought form that helped you survive. Then it kept looping it long after you outgrew it. And because it sounds familiar, it feels true. That's the trap. This echo speaks in certainty. But certainty is not a signal of truth. It's often a signal of repetition. So how do we tell the difference? The key is resonance. Your true signal carries calm precision, even in challenge. Your echo carries tight urgency, a need to solve, escape, fix, or defend. Signal expands space. Echo compresses it. Signal opens awareness. Echo closes the loop. This is not about labeling the echo as wrong. It's about learning to read it as a looped signal and choosing whether or not to continue running it. Let's bring this into clarity. When you hear a voice say, "You're falling behind," ask, does this expand or constrict your attention? Does it open clarity or reinforce a loop? That answer tells you everything. Echoes often come with intensity, but intensity is not depth. It's compression. Your authentic signal may arrive quiet, but it's unmistakable once you've learned to recognize its qualities. Feels clear, not loud, not urgent, just aligned. Here's a practice. When you hear a repeating thought, pause. Don't analyze. Don't argue. Just ask, what shape does this create in my awareness? Does it fragment? Does it tighten? Does it close my field? That's an echo. Then, ask what your signal would say if that echo weren't running the dialogue. At first, this may feel unfamiliar, but over time, a new tone emerges. This is dimensional discernment, learning to feel thought not as content, but as geometry of awareness. And the moment you make that shift, the echo loses authority. It may still arise, but it no longer runs the system. That's the moment you begin to choose again, not from habit, but from alignment. Next, we will decode emotion as a language, not a reaction, and learn to read its hidden grammar. Emotion is not chaos. It's not noise. It's not a side effect of experience. Emotion is syntax. It is structured, sequenced, formatted with precision. You've been feeling emotion your whole life, but until you learn to read it as a coded system, you'll mistake sensation for signal and reaction for architecture. Let's remove the distortion. Emotion is not random. It arrives with timing, intensity, shape, color, texture, and narrative pattern. Each of these elements is a syntax marker, a kind of grammatical layer that shapes how the emotion moves through your field. That movement is everything, because it reveals the emotional grammar you've been using to build your internal world. Now, here's what changes everything. Emotion doesn't just happen to you. It builds the space you think inside. It sets the rules for what you notice. It formats the lens through which memory, belief, and identity unfold. Each emotional state is a dimensional setting. It's like opening a specific app in your consciousness. A set of functions, filters, and behaviors all bundled inside one felt experience. Anger contracts time and sharpens focus. Grief slows cognition and expands depth. Joy increases bandwidth and softens resistance. Shame fragments coherence and triggers defensive loops. None of this is metaphor. This is emotional syntax in motion. You're not just feeling something. You're stepping into a layered protocol, a space with specific parameters and symbolic roles. The key is to stop interpreting emotion through content and begin reading it as form. For example, rather than saying, "I feel anxious because of that deadline," ask, "What is the structure of this anxiety? Is it looping? Is it pointed? Is it shallow or dense? What time signature is it operating in? Past-based, future predictive, present avoidant?" These are not therapy questions. They are dimensional diagnostics. They tell you whether you're moving through emotion or being structured by it without your awareness. Now, how do we read the grammar of feeling? Start with sequence. What emotion usually comes first in your system? Irritation, guilt, confusion, detachment. That's your default emotional syntax opener, the first note in your inner composition. Then trace the next typical layer. For example, confusion may lead to self-blame. Irritation may lead to control-seeking. Excitement may lead to overextension. That sequence is your syntax signature. Once you name it, you can interrupt it, not to suppress, but to restructure. Next is timing. Does the emotion arrive as a burst or a slow swell? Does it hit all at once or unfold in layers? This is your emotional tempo, and it's not accidental. Fast emotions tend to bypass nuance. Slow ones often carry deeper symbolic codes. Reading tempo helps you sense how much of your awareness is being shaped unconsciously. Now move to tone. Every emotion has a vibrational tone, not metaphorically, but sonically. A low, dull emotional tone creates heaviness and stillness. A high, tight tone often sharpens thinking but reduces field awareness. Tone matters because it influences the perceptual resonance of your entire system. Most people confuse emotional tone with emotional truth. But just because an emotion is loud doesn't make it accurate. Truth lives in coherence, not intensity. This is one of the most vital discernments in dimensional literacy. You must learn to feel the difference between loud emotion and clear signal. Loud emotion often loops. Clear signal carries forward motion. Loud emotion tries to resolve. Clear signal simply reveals. Let's go deeper. Emotion also speaks in color and spatial placement. Feelings aren't just inside you, they have location. Shame may feel like it pulls downward and backward. Joy may feel like an outward expansion in all directions. Anger might sit sharp in the chest or face. Love might radiate symmetrically, warming every edge of the body. These are not random sensations. They are symbolic spatial codes, directional indicators of how energy wants to move. And if you read those codes, you can work with them, not against them. So when emotion arises, instead of asking, "Why do I feel this?" ask, "What shape is this emotion taking in my awareness? What direction is it moving in my field? What color, tone, and texture does it carry?" These questions shift you from being inside the feeling to becoming the reader of its structure. That shift is sovereignty. You're not bypassing emotion. You're honoring it by respecting its intelligence and reading its design. Once you recognize the emotional syntax running your system, you can start to rewrite the sentence or switch languages entirely. You are not bound by the emotional grammar you inherited. You can train your system to feel in new syntax, to hold depth without collapse, to feel grief without shutting down, to feel intensity without splitting awareness, to feel desire without distortion. This is advanced perception. This is design through reading. Next, we will explore how your inner architecture holds this syntax, not in chaos, but in rooms, and how every thought, belief, and identity you've ever carried has lived in those hidden spaces. Your mind is not a blank slate. It is not a void. It is not a linear tunnel of thought. Your mind is a multi-room structure, and each room carries a different tone, memory field, behavioral script, and perceptual filter. You move between these rooms all the time. But unless you know how to read them, how to recognize their design, you'll confuse the architecture for the self. Let's break this open. There's a version of you that only shows up under pressure. There's another that emerges in joy. One that holds grief. One that speaks only when alone. One that goes silent in conflict. One that thrives in insight. One that collapses under scrutiny. These are not moods. They are rooms. Each one holds its own atmospheric conditions, internal narratives, and emotional geometry. And when you step into one, your entire perception changes: what you believe, what you feel, what you expect. This is identity not as a fixed trait, but as modular architecture. And this architecture can be read. Each room has a sensory atmosphere, a dominant emotional climate, a memory signature, a symbolic function. For example, the room of avoidance may feel dim, tight, soundless. The room of creativity may feel warm, open, full of inner movement. The room of defense may feel sharp, angular, armored. You're not imagining these qualities. You are inhabiting them spatially and symbolically. Now, most people don't realize these rooms exist, so they believe every room is them. They identify with the mood, the behavior, the limitation. But the truth is, you can leave the room. You can open doors inside your own mind. But first, you must find the walls. Dimensional literacy means learning to read. What space am I in right now? What narrative is housed here? What feeling is dominant in this space? What am I unable to access from here? These questions help you locate yourself in your own mind. And from that location, you gain access to doorways. Every room has a door, a symbolic key that lets you shift state. That key may be a memory, a gesture, a visualization, a word, or a simple change in posture or tone. When you learn the language of those keys, you become an architect, not just an inhabitant. You can build new rooms. You can close old ones. You can collapse dead-end corridors and design open fields of possibility. You no longer confuse where you are with who you are. And that clarity changes everything. Let's bring this into practice. Pause. Feel your inner space. Sense the room you're currently in. What does it feel like? What is the ceiling height of your thought? What are the textures? Smooth, jagged, flat, pulsing? Is there light or shadow? Movement or stillness? You're reading the architecture now. Not through logic, through symbolic sensory literacy. Once you do this, patterns become maps. Loops become doorways. Walls become invitations to redesign. This is the essence of internal authorship. Next, we will unpack the lens that most forget exists, the one doing the seeing, and how your perception itself is layered in filters you didn't know were there. Perception is not a camera. It doesn't capture what's there. It builds what's possible. You don't see reality. You see what your internal architecture allows you to register. Everything else is filtered out not by choice but by structural design. Your perception is not passive. It's a lens system, full of biases, emotional tints, symbolic codings, memory filters, and narrative constraints. And here's the most important part. This lens doesn't feel like a lens. It feels like truth. This is the trap most fall into. They assume they're seeing what is, but what they're really seeing is what their system permits them to perceive, based on what it's structured to expect. Perception is not universal. It is deeply personal and often invisible to the one perceiving. So let's bring that into clarity. At any moment, your perception is being shaped by multiple hidden forces: emotional state, identity schema, unconscious beliefs, cultural overlays, sensory biases, spatial memory. Together, these create a scaffold, a kind of perceptual architecture that determines what you notice, interpret, and ignore. This scaffold is dynamic, it shifts based on context. But without awareness, those shifts happen without consent. Let's trace an example. Someone gives you a compliment, but your scaffold is built from mistrust or emotional debt. So your perception reinterprets that compliment as manipulation or obligation. Not because it is those things, but because your lens can't yet receive without distortion. That's not flaw, it's just structure. Now, most frameworks teach perception as a skill to improve. Focus harder, Practice presence. Sharpen attention. But dimensional literacy teaches something far more powerful. To read the lens itself. To recognize when the structure doing the perceiving is outdated, limited, or misaligned. Here's the key. If you can see your perception, you're no longer fully inside it. You've created distance. And in that distance, you gain authorship. Let's deepen that. There are three main kinds of perception distortions that shape experience without your awareness. Emotional filters. You don't just see what's in front of you. You see through the emotional residue you haven't metabolized. Symbolic assumptions. Your mind assigns symbolic meaning to people, places, and events based on subconscious templates. Narrative overlays. You project the next likely outcome based on past storyline loops, not present potential. None of this is conscious. All of it is architectural. This is why two people can enter the same space, experience the same event, and walk away with completely different realities. They're not lying. They're perceiving from different scaffolds. And once you understand that, you stop arguing about reality. You start reading the lenses. Now, how do you begin to read your own? Start with contrast. When you're triggered, ask yourself, what part of me is doing the perceiving right now? Not the surface emotion, the structure. Does this perception arise from fear, from pattern, from defense, from signal? Then scan for repetition. Where does your perception collapse into sameness? Do you often expect disappointment? Do you project guilt onto stillness? Do you see rejection in neutrality? These are not truths. They are recurring lens echoes. They reveal where your perception has fused with a historical pattern. Once seen, they can be rewritten. Here's a simple way to begin. Each morning, ask, what is the tone of my lens today? Is it foggy or sharp? Expansive or narrow? Does it feel clear or prescripted? This self-reading practice trains dimensional discernment, the ability to sense perception itself as changeable structure, not fixed reality. Now, why does this matter? Because the lens you perceive through determines which opportunities are even visible to you. If your lens is coated in lack, abundance won't register as real. If it's colored by grief, joy may feel suspicious. If it's warped by performance, stillness may feel unsafe. That means the greatest changes in life don't come from action alone. They come from lens recalibration. And here's the liberating truth. You can rewrite the lens. You can choose perception not based on wishful thinking, but based on symbolic clarity, spatial neutrality, and emotional alignment. And that changes the field of possibility around you, not metaphysically but perceptually. Next, we'll learn how to sense the silent space between thoughts, the origin field where all structure arises. Thoughts are not the source. They are the surface. They are the architecture after design. To access dimensional clarity, you must go to the place before thought. The still space where meaning hasn't yet formed, where identity hasn't yet fused, where content hasn't yet taken shape. This is the field of origin. It is always there, behind, between, beneath the noise. But because it doesn't speak in words, it's often missed. This space is not emptiness. It is fullness without structure, a vibrational medium where everything arises, and nothing has been labeled yet. To work with thought as form, you must first know what it feels like to not be thinking. Not distracted, not numbed out, not waiting for the next idea, but deeply inside the pre-thought atmosphere. Here's what's profound. This field is not mental, it's spatial. It's felt through presence, not processed through language. Let's trace it now. Pause. Allow the next thought to arrive. But instead of attaching to it, notice the space around it. Notice the gap before the thought formed. That gap is the origin field. It's subtle, but it's not silent. It holds texture, stillness, potential, resonance. And inside that resonance is design power. Most people chase clarity by adding more thought, more insight, more logic. But true clarity comes from accessing this prior layer, where thought hasn't yet crystallized. When you rest awareness in the origin field, several things shift. Emotional turbulence settles. Narrative loops quiet. Sensory awareness expands. Symbolic guidance becomes accessible. This is not meditation. This is dimensional positioning. You are reorienting to the place before architecture, the canvas behind the form. And from this place, you don't generate thoughts. You receive them, not passively, but with precision. The thoughts that arrive from this field carry different qualities. They are unforced, symbolically aligned, calmly resonant. They don't argue. They reveal. This is how you begin to distinguish signal from noise. The signal rises through the origin field. Noise emerges outside it, from loops, from echo, from unprocessed emotional overlays. And the moment you can sense that difference, you gain authorship of your mind's architecture. Because you are no longer building from compulsion. You are shaping from clarity. Now, here's the deeper truth. The origin field is not other. It is you before identification. It is your baseline state of awareness, unpatterned, undivided, undistorted. You've touched it in moments of awe, deep beauty, dream states, or timeless stillness. But dimensional literacy trains you to access it deliberately, because from here all real design begins. So practice this. Next time your thoughts spiral, pause. Don't fight the spiral. Simply feel for the space before the next thought comes. Drop your attention into the gap. That is not absence. That is the living field waiting to be read. Next, we will decode how reality itself reflects your internal alignment, not through logic, but through symbolic mirroring. Reality isn't literal. It's symbolic. It reflects, echoes, nudges, and arranges itself around your internal architecture. Not as punishment or reward, but as feedback syntax. Every conversation, every interruption, every delay, coincidence, attraction, or friction point. Each is a symbol, wrapped in circumstance. The mistake is to analyze them at surface level. The real task is to decode them. Let's say a project keeps falling through. You try harder. You blame logistics. You recalibrate the task. But it happens again and again. Different context, same result. On the surface, it's frustration. But symbolically, it might be your system signaling that this effort is misaligned with your signal architecture. The repetition isn't the problem. It's the mirror. This mirror doesn't punish. It shows. It reveals the resonance you're broadcasting below your stated intentions. Dimensional literacy means learning to read life like a language, not an obstacle course. It means understanding that reality doesn't just respond to behavior. It reflects internal patterns of structure. Not as magic, not as superstition, as signal alignment. So when something repeats, or jars you, or shows up louder than expected, ask, what symbol is this carrying? What is this mirroring in my current architecture? What is being shown about how I'm structuring my perception, identity, or signal? This isn't psychological analysis. It's symbolic alignment reading. It requires quietness, presence, and precision. Not interpretation through narrative, but resonance through structure. Let's go deeper. Symbols in your life don't speak in English. They speak in pattern recognition, spatial repetition, emotional sequence, and archetypal metaphor. You meet the same kind of resistance in different jobs. That's not chance, that's a resonance loop. You attract the same energy in partners with new faces. That's not failure, that's a symbolic repetition pattern. You get physical symptoms in moments of identity confusion. That's not random, that's somatic messaging from the symbolic field. So how do you decode it? First, remove the idea of coincidence. That doesn't mean every event is planned or personal. It means every moment is readable. Once you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And instead ask, what structure in me is being shown through this event? The mirror becomes legible. And in that legibility, you find freedom. Now, let's talk about the layers of symbolic mirroring. There are 5 primary layers that show up in your day-to-day experience. Emotional echo. The external field matches your unprocessed emotional tone. Narrative reinforcement. You encounter versions of your internal story reflected in characters and events. Archetypal reflection. You attract symbols that embody your current role. Seeker, shadow, teacher, threshold guardian. Spatial messaging. The energy of a room, street, or environment communicates alignment or friction. Temporal clustering. Events group together in time to emphasize a particular emotional theme or symbolic threshold. When you begin reading these layers, reality unfolds like a coded dream. And that's the real secret. Your waking life is a dream, structured by your symbolic architecture and emotional sequencing. Not unreal, just symbolically formatted. Let's ground this with practice. Look back at the past 3 days. What moments stood out emotionally, positive or negative? Now ask, what emotional texture did they carry? What narrative or pattern did they seem to repeat? What roles were you cast into? What symbols were present? Colors, archetypes, directional shifts. This is dream work in real-time reality. And the more skilled you become at reading this mirror, the more refined your dimensional literacy becomes. Because now, reality is no longer confusing. It's communicative. It's not trying to trap or delay you. It's offering calibrated signal feedback through reflection, not punishment. And when your inner architecture becomes more coherent, the mirror softens. The reflections become less jarring. They arrive with grace, because now you're reading the dream while living it. Next, we'll explore how resonance loops shape this mirror field, and how to track why the same story keeps circling back. You've said it before. Why does this keep happening? Different name, same feeling. Different year, same friction. This isn't bad luck. It's not cosmic punishment. It's not subconscious sabotage. It's a resonance loop. Your system is broadcasting a frequency pattern, and reality, like a tuning fork, is vibrating back that same structure again and again until it's made visible. This loop is not personal. It's architectural. It's the recursive behavior of unshifted signal, the echo chamber of unreleased architecture. And the sooner you stop blaming the loop, the faster you can read it and restructure it. So what is a resonance loop? It's a closed energetic circuit built from repeated emotional sequences, identity fracture points, unresolved symbolic themes, inherited cognitive scaffolds, and often protection patterns that were useful once but now distort perception. Let's break this down. You enter a new situation with high intention, but it quietly activates a familiar emotional imprint. You begin behaving, feeling, or perceiving through that old filter, and that filter alters your signal. And that altered signal invites the same kind of response you were trying to escape. Not consciously, but structurally. This is how loops are maintained. Not through weakness, through unexamined design. Dimensional literacy gives you the tools to interrupt that design, to read the signal before it starts repeating. Let's trace how. Step 1 is recognition. You must name the pattern without shame. Not why am I like this, but what structure is repeating here? What shape does it take? What emotional color does it carry? What sensory memory echoes within it? Naming the loop breaks identification. Now you're reading it, not living it. Step 2 is trajectory tracing. Where does this loop begin? Often, it's not at the event. It's in the anticipation. The moment you expect rejection, defense, collapse, or performance, that expectation becomes the broadcast, and the world answers with events that match the tone. So find the first moment the loop whispered its structure, not when it shouted. That's your point of access. Step 3 is structural reversal. This doesn't mean pushing the opposite action. It means shifting the signal beneath the action. If your loop is rooted in being unseen, the reversal isn't seeking visibility. It's embodying presence without needing reflection. If your loop is abandonment, the reversal isn't clinging. It's stabilizing your field to carry coherence in solitude. The loop only dissolves when the emotional architecture behind it has shifted, not the behavior, the pattern tone driving the behavior. Step 4 is symbolic replacement. You don't just release loops, you must fill the space they once occupied. Otherwise, your system reverts to the known pattern. You do this by introducing a new emotional syntax, a new spatial field, a new symbolic anchor. This could be a phrase, posture, a tone of voice, a visualization, a behavioral micro-choice with architectural meaning. The symbol must carry emotional truth, not conceptual novelty. And finally, step 5 is loop reading in real time. This is dimensional fluency in motion. Each time the loop attempts to re-engage, pause. Read it. Name it, feel its shape, sense its origin, trace its expectation, and then shift your signal, not your reaction. That's when the loop ends. Not by force, by being unmatched. Because the loop can't repeat if it has no structure to cling to. It dissolves into memory, and you step into a new timeline clean of repetition. Next, we explore the deeper language beneath this repetition, dimensional syntax, the grammar of experience itself. Every moment you live passes through a hidden structure. Not just physical space, not just time, but dimensional syntax, the invisible grammar behind how experience is formed, sequenced, and felt. Syntax doesn't only belong to sentences. It belongs to thought, to perception, to identity, to emotion, to reality itself. The way a thought is built follows a syntactic structure. The way an event unfolds contains a progression, a narrative form even when unspoken. Even silence has syntax. This chapter is about learning to read that form, not the content of life but the format. Because content distracts. Format reveals. Let's say you walk into a room and feel dismissed. On the surface, you focus on what was said or not said. But beneath that is the syntax of the moment, the sequence, the tension, the timing, the placement, the emotional directionality. If you read the syntax, you don't just understand what happened, you understand how the structure of the moment was shaped. Now you can begin to rewrite it. So what is dimensional syntax? It is the structural code of experience. The arrangement of internal and external components that create meaning, momentum, and mood. Thought has syntax. Emotion has syntax. Conversation has syntax. Even silence has a grammar. Every pause, every glance, every shift in internal or external space follows rules, not imposed, but architected by the signal field in play. That signal field is your current emotional tone, mental framing, and symbolic context, all combining to form a real-time sequence. Once you can read the syntax of an experience, you can see where the loop begins, where coherence collapses, where silence holds weight, where gesture overrides words, where emotional meaning exceeds logic. This is not theory. This is precision design. Let's break down the 5 core elements of dimensional syntax. Sequencing. How events, thoughts, or emotions are ordered. When the order changes, the meaning shifts. Pacing. The timing between signals. Fast syntax increases urgency. Slow syntax deepens symbolic density. Weighting. Which element carries emotional gravity in the moment? Sometimes what isn't said has the most weight. Orientation. Which direction the energy is flowing, toward, away, looping, diffusing. Framing. The invisible belief or emotional tone shaping how the moment is received. These 5 work together to shape the dimensional syntax of any situation. Now, how do you read this in daily life? Start by noticing inversion patterns, moments when what's said contradicts what's felt. The syntax becomes visible in the misalignment. Someone says, "I'm fine," but their pacing, tone, and weighting say otherwise. That's syntax speaking louder than surface. Or you feel yourself reacting before anything happens. The emotional syntax of the space preceded the event. That's a signal of environmental grammar. Here's the deeper move. Your own thoughts follow these same rules. Next time a self-judging thought arises, pause. Ask, what is the sequence of this thought? Is it following a fast, compressed syntax? Is it looping back to an emotional anchor that isn't current? By reading this internal structure, you unhook from the thought as truth and begin to see it as format. Format can be restructured. Let's try a practice. Think of a belief you're holding. Now break it into components. What's the first emotion in the sequence? What's the pacing of how this belief moves through your mind? Where does the thought land? Does it build clarity or compress possibility? What part of the thought feels heavy, even if it's logical? These markers expose the syntax pattern of that belief. And when you can see the pattern, you can rewrite the code. Here's how. Reverse the sequence. Change the emotional order. Alter the pacing. Add space between elements. Slow down thought. Shift the weighting. Emphasize what you normally skip. Reroute the orientation. Turn the focus from judgment to presence. Reframe the context. Give the thought a new symbolic backdrop. These microshifts change the way the experience forms, and that, in turn, changes its meaning. Remember, dimensional syntax is not about content correction. It's about pattern awareness. Once you learn to feel thought as structure, not just message, you begin to shape from signal, not reaction. And that changes everything. Next, we will examine how identity itself bends experience, not by force, but through narrative gravity. Identity isn't a name. It's not your job title, your memories, your preferences. It's not even your self-description. Identity is gravitational, pulls experience toward it. It bends events around it. It attracts certain timelines and repels others, not because of effort, but because of structural force. That force is narrative gravity, the unspoken story you believe about who you are. It's not always conscious. In fact, most of it is buried beneath your stated self-image. But even when unseen, it exerts massive influence. Every day, your narrative gravity determines what you believe is possible, what you unconsciously avoid, what patterns keep repeating, what timelines you select. Let's look at how this works. If your core identity story is, "I must fix everything," you will unconsciously attract broken systems, emotional puzzles, unresolved people. Not because you want chaos, but because your gravitational field is calibrated to give you a role, the fixer. Or, if your internal story is, "I am unseen," you will unconsciously filter out attention, or deflect intimacy, or minimize your signal, and life will reflect that minimized field back to you. This isn't self-fulfilling prophecy. It's gravitational physics, identity shaping signal, and signal shaping reflection. Here's the key. Most of your narrative gravity was not self-authored. It was inherited, absorbed, or formed under pressure. You adopted a storyline to survive or belong, and then forgot it was a choice. Dimensional literacy means recognizing this, and learning to read your identity not as fact but as architecture. So, how do you read narrative gravity? Start with emotional repetition. What emotions keep returning, even when the content changes? That emotional orbit reveals the pull of identity. Then, explore your role recurrences. Are you always the teacher, the scapegoat, the rescuer, the outsider, the performer? These roles point to your internal narrative, the story that structures your presence. Now, go to language loops. What phrases do you repeat to yourself in crisis or decision-making? "I have to hold it all together. No one really sees me. If I don't do it, no one will." These aren't just thoughts. They're gravity lines. They anchor you to a version of self. To shift your timeline, you must shift your gravitational story. That begins with one question. Who would I be without this role? That question creates a wobble in the gravitational field. It opens space. It destabilizes the pattern, which is exactly what's required for change. Then you begin to test new signals. Not just through belief, but through embodied signal design. You show up in a moment as someone unburdened. You let stillness enter where fixing once dominated. You let presence speak where performance once took over. Each time you do, your gravitational center shifts. Your narrative realigns. Your signal recalibrates. And the field around you responds. Because the universe doesn't respond to words. It responds to identity signal, coherent, embodied, gravitational. Once you understand this, you don't need to fight for change. You become the center that attracts a new orbit. Next, we will explore how to detect signal from noise and how to train your system to tune into truth without distortion. Every moment, your system is receiving input. Words, images, energy, tone, memory, emotion, vibration. Some of it is coherent. Most of it is static. The challenge isn't receiving. It's discerning, separating signal from noise, core resonance from fragmented echo. This distinction changes everything, because without it, you chase every thought as if it were a truth. You react to every emotion as if it were meaningful. You follow every impulse as if it were guidance. But when you can feel the difference between noise and signal, life becomes exquisitely clear. So what is signal? Signal is clean transmission from the deeper field of self. It does not pressure. It does not confuse. It arrives with simplicity, precision, and inner coherence. It may challenge you, but it won't distort you. Noise, on the other hand, is fragmented data. It comes from loops, past imprints, emotional static, social mirroring, and mental hyperactivity. It mimics signal, but it drains clarity rather than deepening it. Let's bring this into structure. There are 5 key traits of true signal. Spatial calm. Even in urgency, signal brings a still clarity to the body. Resonant tone, the inner sound of the message is warm, clear, and neutral, not reactive. Non-argumentative presence, signal doesn't debate. It lands. Symbolic precision, the image or idea arrives fully formed, not stitched together. Emotional simplicity, signal may feel intense, but not tangled. Compare that to the qualities of noise. Jittery urgency, emotional layering without clarity. Thought spirals, narrative complexity that doesn't resolve. Pressure to act, prove, or defend. Noise isn't evil. It's just unintegrated input. It carries unprocessed signal that's been fractured by fear, habit, or overload. When you mistake noise for signal, you chase distraction and call it destiny. You follow patterns and call them intuition. You confuse unresolved emotion for inner knowing. To become dimensionally literate, you must train your perceptual field to identify signal at its point of origin, before the static attaches. This training begins with resonance checking. Here's how it works. When you receive an impulse, message, thought, or intuition, pause. Feel its effect on your system. Does your awareness expand or contract? Does your emotional field open or fragment? Do you feel a centered invitation or an anxious demand? That's the first layer of signal reading. Then drop the content. Ignore the words. Feel the geometry. Signal has shape, a certain weight, presence. Noise feels like flickering. Signal feels like anchoring. Now, here's where most get tricked. Signal can feel quiet, underwhelming, subtle, because your system is trained to equate importance with volume. But true signal is often the whisper that lands deeper than the scream. It does not compete with noise. It waits for your recognition. Let's go deeper. Your body is not just a vessel. It's a tuning chamber. Every day, it registers subtle changes in field, energy, and meaning before your mind can label them. That's not mystical. It's perceptual truth. So if you want to sharpen discernment, stop thinking your way to clarity. Start listening with your body. Your breath will tell you. Your spine will respond. Your skin will register coherence long before your brain agrees. When a thought is true, your system relaxes. When a signal is clear, your awareness expands. When a choice is aligned, your field stops arguing. And that's the key. Signal stops the argument. It's not about being right. It's about being resonant. Here's a practice. Each morning, ask a simple question internally. What signal wants to move through me today? Then do nothing. Let your awareness rest. If an image, phrase, color, or sensation arises, don't interpret. Just feel the clarity or static it brings. The ones with static are noise. The ones with clarity are signal. Do this every day. You will begin to rebuild your intuitive field, not as magic, but as precision instrumentation. Eventually, your system will know instantly, that's noise. This is signal. And you will follow what aligns, not what shouts. Next, we will explore how dreams, symbols, and strange memory flashes hold encrypted guidance, and how to read their dimensional code. Your subconscious doesn't speak in logic. It speaks in symbol, compression, and dream-encoded messages. It speaks when the noise quiets. It speaks when the mind lets go of control. Dreams are not just emotional recycling. They are data packets from your dimensional archive, carrying messages your waking mind couldn't process through standard syntax. But they're encrypted, because the subconscious doesn't deliver instruction manuals. It delivers symbols wrapped in distortion. It delivers meaning through metaphor, association, color, timing, and space. To the untrained mind, this seems like nonsense. But to the symbol literate, it's pure design language. Your dreams reveal. emotional patterns too complex for daylight, timeline intersections from past, present, and possible future, identity architecture in flux, unprocessed resonance loops, symbols needing conscious activation. The key is not to analyze your dreams. It's to read them like coded terrain. Let's say you dream of falling through an endless building. The content might seem terrifying, but the symbolic layer reveals your inner identity structure is collapsing old frameworks. The building is mind architecture. The fall is descent into the origin field. The endlessness is release from narrative gravity. Every element is usable if you know how to translate. So how do you begin dream decryption? First, shift your approach. Don't ask, what does this dream mean? Ask, what is this dream doing to my inner space? Does it compress or expand? Reveal or confuse? Bring grief or resolve? That effect tells you the frequency function of the dream, not just its theme. Then scan the geometry of the dream. Was it tight or vast? Colorless or vibrant? Repetitive or fluid? Dreams often mirror your symbolic operating system. The field you navigate in them tells you how your system currently holds complexity. If your dreams are fragmented, scattered, looping, that's a signal of unresolved emotional syntax. If they are cinematic, layered, nonlinear but coherent, your symbolic intelligence is active. Don't try to make sense. Sense the structure. Now, memory flashes are part of this same code family. Those sudden inner replays you didn't ask for? They're dream echoes in waking life. A memory flashes not because it's important to the past, but because it holds a symbolic key for your present. Dimensional literacy means tracking when memory arises out of context, and asking what symbolic frequency it's holding. Example, a childhood moment where you said nothing while others decided your fate. The memory returns after a decision-heavy conversation. That's not nostalgia. That's symbolic reinforcement. The memory is code. It's showing you what loop is about to repeat, unless you intervene. So, how do you make use of these encrypted moments? You don't fix them. You interact with them. You treat dreams and memory flashes as symbolic envoys. You ask them what they need, what role they're playing, what room in your psyche they're trying to enter or exit. And most of all, you give them space, because dreams are the subconscious attempting dimensional conversation. And if you listen fluently, they become more precise. Eventually, the encryption lessens. The symbols become sharper. The guidance becomes clearer, not because it's louder, but because you've trained your symbolic eye. And the world becomes a dream you can finally read. Next, we will learn how to track your attention across dimensional space, discovering where you truly are, not just where your body sits. You are not where your body is. You are where your attention has landed. Your attention determines your dimensional coordinates, the location of your consciousness within layered space. And most of the time, you're not actually here. You're cycling through memories, projecting timelines, editing narratives, simulating outcomes. Your attention is a traveler, and it leaves footprints in every layer it enters. To become literate in the hidden architecture of self, you must begin to track your attention with geometric precision. Because attention is not abstract. It has coordinates. It occupies symbolic locations that shape the field of your experience. Right now, as you hear these words, your body may be still, but your attention could be 10 years behind you, or 2 days ahead, or caught between emotional echoes that are still moving, even though the event is long gone. The first step in dimensional self-navigation is to ask, where am I now in awareness, not in location? That question unlocks the map. Let's get clear. Your attention doesn't float randomly. It anchors to specific structures, past emotional imprints, future anticipations, imagined conversations, identity roles, symbolic memory zones, and wherever it lands, it alters the field around you. Your mood changes, your thoughts adjust, your body reacts. Your decisions reflect the logic of that coordinate, not your present. This means every interaction is affected not just by context, but by where your awareness was seconds before it entered the room. So now you ask, what happens when I stay partially in an argument from yesterday while having a conversation today? Or when I drift into imagined rejection while someone is offering love. Or when I center myself in performance rather than presence. The outer world doesn't shift, but your experience becomes distorted. Because your coordinates have moved. Attention is a form of dimensional transport. And if you can't track where it's going, you live in a fractured map, never quite here, never quite whole. Let's bring this into practice. Close your eyes. Feel into this moment. Not the thought, the field. Where are you inside that field? Do you feel ahead of yourself? Behind your breath? Fragmented across multiple scenes? If yes, you're not malfunctioning. You're spread. Your coordinates are scattered across internal timelines. Dimensional literacy begins with the art of retrieval. Call your attention back. Feel for the echo trails and gently invite them home. This is not visualization. This is geometric self-location. Over time, you'll start to notice patterns. You'll learn that certain places in your house pull your attention backward. Certain relationships fragment your field before a word is spoken. Certain tones of voice send your coordinates collapsing inward. Once tracked, these become signal codes, not triggers but data. And with that data, you can navigate your space with design, not reaction. Here's the deeper layer. Every emotion you feel is tethered to a dimensional location. Grief often pulls the coordinates downward and into the past. Anxiety spreads the field forward and upward into unreality. Joy centers and expands the field outward, radially. Shame compresses the coordinates inward and down, fragmenting the field from within. You're not just feeling those emotions. You're shifting spatial position inside your consciousness. This is why certain thoughts arrive only in specific emotional states. The thought doesn't live everywhere. It lives in that coordinate set. This is also why healing doesn't just require insight. It requires a return to the centered field where the signal becomes readable again. So, how do you stabilize your coordinates? Through attention field anchoring. Begin with breath, not as relaxation, but as dimensional recalibration. Let the inhale draw attention back from its scattered points. Let the exhale ground it into now space. Then name the coordinate honestly. I'm not here. I'm reliving an old fear. I'm 3 steps ahead, anticipating failure. I'm in a role, not a presence. This naming doesn't fix. It locates. And once you locate, you can choose. Not to force your way into now, but to reorient your attention through calm gravity, not anxious correction. That choice changes your signal. And your signal changes the quality of the space around you. Because reality doesn't respond to words, it responds to where your field actually is. Next, we'll explore how your awareness reads the emotional atmosphere of space, even before a single word is spoken. Every space you enter is already speaking. Long before voices, long before events, there is a tone, a texture, a field signature that your system registers immediately. But most people override this recognition. They walk into rooms and don't realize their mood shifted. They leave conversations and don't notice the residue in their body. They feel tension and mistake it for internal fault, not external signal. This is the art of reading field language. It's not mystical. It's not intuitive guesswork. It's structural. It's the real-time detection of emotional geometry in shared space. You've felt this your whole life. You walk into a room and feel urgency, though nothing is said. You sit down next to someone and sense collapse. You open an email and know it carries emotional charge, even before you read it. These aren't hunches. They are field readings. Your system picks up on spatial pressure points, unspoken emotional residue, frequency echoes from previous interactions, identity dynamics embedded in space, symbolic arrangements that mirror inner structure. But if you've been trained to dismiss subtlety, you'll override this data. You'll believe you're overreacting when, in fact, you're receiving. So how do we learn to read a space with clarity? First, you pause before interpretation. Don't decide what the space means. Sense how it feels. Close your eyes. Scan the field. Is it tight, wide, thick, hollow? Where is the pull to the floor, to the ceiling, to the back corner? This spatial texture is emotional language, spoken silently. Then check your breath pattern. When a field is coherent, breath opens naturally. When a field is distorted, breath shortens or fragments. Not from fear, but from compression. This isn't your failing. It's a response to the spatial syntax. Next, locate the center of gravity in the room. In some rooms, it's a person. In others, it's a memory or unspoken grief hanging in the field. Sometimes it's a symbol, a desk, a corner, a door. This gravitational center bends the field around it. When you detect it, you're not being mystical. You're reading the emotional topology of the space. Now here's the key. You're not just receiving the field, you're influencing it. Your signal enters the room and changes the tone. If your signal is scattered, it amplifies fragmentation. If your signal is clear, it begins to shape resonance around it. You are never passive. You are always part of the field equation. So, how do you bring clarity into a noisy room? Not by controlling, by stabilizing your own coordinates as we explored before, by tuning your inner field to coherence, and letting the room adjust without force. This is presence as architecture. Here's a practice. Walk into any space, a cafe, office, hallway. Before engaging, pause. Ask, what is the emotional pressure of this field? Where is the center? What memory or symbolic energy might be lingering? Then, what happens when I do nothing but stabilize my own signal? Watch the field shift. You'll begin to see that most moods aren't yours. Most discomfort isn't internal conflict. It's a misreading or suppression of field data. Once you read the space, you can speak into it with precision. Not to fill silence, but to direct energy. Because language, tone, posture, they don't just express. They ripple through the field, changing its geometry. You're not just talking, you're designing. Next, we will explore how different timelines carry different temporal textures, and how your identity state literally bends the experience of time. Time doesn't move at a constant speed. It bends, thickens, it sharpens, it dissolves, and it does all of that depending on who you're being when you experience it. You've felt this. In one identity state, a minute can feel like an hour. In another, 3 hours pass like smoke. Sometimes time slows before a major emotional event. Other times it collapses after you leave a high-friction space. This isn't perception error. It's temporal texture. Your experience of time is shaped not by clocks, but by the dimensional signature of your current identity. You don't live in neutral time. You live in time that matches the shape and frequency of your attention, emotion, and presence. Let's break this open. When your system is in defense, time contracts. Every second feels like pressure. Your awareness splinters, and the moment thickens. When you're in coherence, time opens. There's breath. There's space. The now becomes wide enough to hold memory, insight, and future all at once. The question is not, how much time do I have? The question is, what version of me is experiencing this time? Because each identity format carries its own temporal bias. Let's map a few. The fixer feels behind. Time rushes. Every moment is a task. The future looms. The performer. Time becomes performance space, measured by feedback loops, not actual experience. The witness. Time expands. There's room between moments. Pattern becomes visible. The fragmented self. Time scatters. Events blur. Sequence breaks. Memory feels unreliable. The integrated self. Time flows. Events make sense in emotional sequence, even when nonlinear. None of these are permanent. They're coordinates. And once you become aware of the identity shaping your time experience, you can change the texture of time. Let's go further. There are 4 core attributes that shape temporal texture. Density, how thick or light the moment feels. Velocity, how fast or slow events seem to unfold. Sequencing, whether time flows in order or skips/jumps. Emotional weighting, how much gravity each moment carries. Let's say you're overwhelmed. That's not just stress. That's high density, high velocity with fragmented sequencing. Now say you're absorbed in creative flow. That's low density, variable velocity, clear sequencing, balanced weighting. Same clock, different reality. That's dimensional time. So, how do you begin to read temporal texture in real time? Start with a simple pause. Right now, feel the density of this moment. Is it thick like pushing through fog? Or light like standing in air? That's texture. Now feel the velocity. Is the moment rushing you forward? Or is it suspended like a held breath? Now check your sequencing. Are you present? Or are your thoughts leaping between memories and future projections? Then notice waiting. What part of the moment holds the most emotional gravity? And is that waiting authentic or inherited? These simple diagnostics tell you everything about how your current identity is shaping your time experience. And from there, you can shift. How? By changing identity posture. This means adjusting your attention, emotional field, and internal stance, not toward performance, but toward presence recalibration. Here's a micro practice. When time feels too fast, slow your breath and lower your attention from the head into the chest. You're not slowing time. You're shifting to a self that doesn't rush. When time feels heavy, widen your field of awareness. Allow more subtle data in. You're exiting the identity that compresses reality and entering one that trusts space. When time feels broken, recall the symbolic thread. Ask, what theme is trying to be completed here? Your rest-itching narrative and restoring emotional sequence. This is not metaphysical wish-making. It's conscious identity modulation to reshape time's architecture. Over time, you'll recognize your own temporal signatures. You'll feel when a familiar story is speeding up your clock. You'll sense when grief is thickening time. You'll catch the shift from fluid to fractured. And instead of reacting, you'll read. And once you read, you can rewrite. Time is not something you manage. It's something you shape through dimensional posture and signal tone. Next, we'll track how recurring symbolic patterns in your identity reveal fractals of self, and how to decode them without repeating them. You are not just one person. You are a field made of themes, memories, desires, fears, and symbolic roles. And inside that field lie fractals, repeating patterns that shape the terrain of your identity. These are not errors. They are echo structures, self-similar forms that replicate across time, relationship, and experience. You meet the same archetypes in different bodies. You live different versions of the same emotional event. You say, I thought I healed this. As the pattern returns with a new face, this is fractal identity. It's not punishment. It's not failure. It's the nature of your symbolic architecture, repeating until it's rewritten. A fractal is a pattern that repeats itself on different scales. In identity, it looks like this. You felt abandoned at age 5. At 25, your partner goes silent during conflict. At 35, your business partner withdraws during pressure. Different players. Same symbolic structure. The pattern is fractal, self-similar across layers. The question isn't, why is this happening again? The question is, what part of my structure keeps calling this form forward? Because these themes aren't just passive. They're invited by the signal you carry. Not consciously, but symbolically. Each fractal is a loop of signal, experience, meaning, and reinforcement. And until the architecture shifts, the pattern continues. So how do you read it? First, name the core motif. What's the emotional event that keeps repeating? Rejection? Performance? Collapse under pressure? Unseen effort? Abandonment after trust? Name the theme, not the story. Then trace the symbolic structure of each repetition. What role are you playing? What role are they playing? What emotional tone is dominant? What action do you always take? What result always follows? This becomes your fractal script. And once it's legible, it's interruptible. Let's bring clarity. If your script is, I'm responsible for everyone's emotional stability, you will attract chaos. You will unconsciously enter dynamics that need fixing. You will burn out until you change the architecture of the script, not by withdrawing, but by refusing the identity role that makes the pattern possible. This is fractal alchemy. You read the pattern. You dissolve the role. You hold a new signal. The field around you shifts. Let's go deeper. Fractals often disguise themselves as just how life works. But once you see them, they become choice points. And here's the shift. Instead of asking, "Why does this keep happening?" ask, "What is the self I become inside this loop?" Because each fractal creates a version of you. And each time you repeat the pattern, that version strengthens. To dissolve the fractal, you must stop becoming that version, even when the situation repeats. That's the real intervention. Here's a practice. Choose one repeating life motif. Now visualize it from above, not as one story, but as a pattern shape. Does it spiral? Does it collapse inward? Does it build and then snap? Does it flatten you? That shape is your identity fractal. Now, step outside the pattern in awareness. Let the shape continue, but refuse to take your usual position inside it. Let the field unfold, but stay in signal. Different posture. New gravity. You'll feel the loop strain. You'll feel the energy look for your old role. You'll feel the moment stall and then release. That's when the pattern breaks. And what follows is not emptiness. It's unwritten identity space, ready for design. Next, we'll examine how belief systems silently rearrange the emotional landscape, shaping not just what you think, but how space itself feels. You're not walking through neutral space. You're moving through sculpted fields, shaped invisibly by the beliefs you carry. And those beliefs aren't just ideas. They are emotional conductors, silently reorganizing how space feels, how emotion flows, and what experiences emerge. Belief is not just mental conviction. It's spatial influence. A belief bends perception. It alters attention. It reshapes the emotional gravity of a room before you've even spoken. Most people think of belief as content, but belief is actually function. It governs how energy moves through your system. It determines what your body allows in. It structures the hidden laws of your reality. Let's break that open. Say you believe, "I have to prove my worth." That belief will alter your spatial presence. You'll unconsciously shrink in some rooms, inflate in others, flatten during praise, and contract when unseen. That belief is conducting the emotional physics around you. You're not just thinking something, you're creating field architecture. This is why belief work isn't about affirmation or argument. It's about recognizing that every belief creates a field shape, and that shape determines what experiences become possible inside it. Belief is a designer of atmosphere. Let's go deeper. Each belief carries 4 main effects. Directional flow. It directs where your attention is allowed to go. Emotional syntax. It determines which emotions are safe and which are suppressed. Spatial bias. It shapes how space feels. Open, closed, compressed, expansive. Narrative gravity. It dictates which stories seem inevitable and which seem out of reach. Take another belief. The world is dangerous. This doesn't only affect your thoughts. It slows your breath. It narrows your field of attention. It heightens your nervous system's alertness. It even affects how light and sound register in your awareness. Space itself begins to feel sharp, fragmented, suspicious. You've stepped into a reality shaped by belief. And once inside, it confirms itself over and over again. This is not a trick of the mind. It's a field feedback loop. You're inside a designed atmosphere, not random, but built from your belief's signal tone. Now, most people don't know which beliefs are running. That's because they learned to equate belief with thought. But beliefs don't live in thoughts. They live in response patterns. To find your real beliefs, don't ask what you say you believe. Ask what you feel in key moments. When you succeed, do you relax or brace? When you're seen, do you open or defend? When you're still, do you trust or perform? Your emotional posture reveals the real belief running the system. And once you detect it, you can begin to reshape the space it has claimed. Here's how. Step 1. Locate the emotional geometry of the belief. Does it create a narrow corridor? A low ceiling? A room without doors? Beliefs don't just carry logic, they carry symbolic architecture. Reading that architecture is your first step. Step 2. Feel the field it generates. Breathe into the space. Does it allow coherence? Or does it fragment your attention? Step 3. Identify its role. Is this belief protecting something? Avoiding something? Performing for someone no longer present? This tells you why the belief persisted even after you outgrew it. Step 4. Introduce a countersignal, not a counter-argument. This is crucial. You don't argue with the belief. You bring in a new field experience that contradicts its spatial design. If the belief compresses you, do something that widens your attention field. If the belief splinters you, bring in a tone, a movement, a breath pattern that restores coherence. This creates an internal contradiction that the old belief cannot resolve, and over time it begins to dissolve. Here's a micro-practice. Sit in silence. Feel into a belief you suspect is shaping your field. Now ask, what shape does this belief form in my body? What movement does it forbid? What part of me contracts to sustain it? Then speak nothing. Just soften. Let the posture change. Let breath return. Let signal rise. You're not replacing belief with thought. You're replacing it with direct experience that carries a different dimensional tone. And once the tone changes, the structure shifts. And once the structure shifts, space opens. You don't change your life by attacking your beliefs. You change your life by rewriting the emotional and spatial physics they operate within. Next, we enter the experiential realm. We'll begin with a method to locate and attune to your core authentic signal, the frequency of you before the patterns. A deep sensory meditation to feel your baseline signal before social conditioning. You have a signal, a real one, not a persona, not a role, not a reaction to the world, but a tone that existed before the world began to shape you. That signal is the most honest frequency in your field. It doesn't speak in concepts. It hums, pulses. It carries weight, presence, clarity, even when you can't find words for it. The problem is, most people lose contact with it. They confuse performance with truth. They confuse habit with self. They confuse survival mode with identity. But beneath all of that is your original tone. And once you feel it, it becomes your reference point, your internal tuning fork. Let's begin. Sit still, but not as an act of control, as an act of opening. Let your breath find its own rhythm. Don't force coherence. Let your system speak in silence. Now close your eyes. Let your attention drop below your usual thinking layer. Below the narratives. Below the commentary. Below the roles. Begin scanning your internal space. Ask one simple question, not to answer but to feel. What part of me feels like me? Before effort, don't look for clarity. Look for tone. Look for weight. Look for familiarity. Some part of your system will respond subtly. A pulsing in the chest. A warmth in the belly. A widening behind the eyes. That's not imagination. That's signal recognition. Now stay there. Let the sensation expand just slightly. Don't force it. Feel it as a note in your body. If your attention wanders, gently return. The mind will offer interpretations. Ignore them. Feel for the nonverbal you. The one who is not afraid. The one who is not trying. The one who simply is. That tone that is your baseline frequency. And it predates your trauma. Predates your scripts. It even predates your name. Now here's where the tuning begins. Once you've felt it, return to it daily. Not as practice, as realignment. When the noise is loud, tune to that tone. When decision feels fragmented, tune to that tone. When emotion overflows, tune to that tone. It will not fix you. It will center you, because that signal carries coherence. It reminds your body how to self-organize. It reminds your field how to simplify. It reminds your identity how to return. This is not transcendence. It's anchoring. Your signal is the inner compass for everything else in this masterclass. And the more clearly you feel it, the more easily you'll detect when something in your life, thought, space, belief, pattern, isn't aligned with it. That contrast is a gift. It's your design guide. Next, we learn how to use the breath as a dimensional shaping tool, not to calm, but to construct internal architecture in real time. Breath is not just survival. It is architecture. Each inhale and exhale sculpts the shape of your inner landscape. Each cycle is a movement through dimensions, not just air through lungs. You breathe not just oxygen, you breathe structure. When your system is fragmented, breath collapses. When your system is aligned, breath opens. This is not just about relaxation. It's about designing internal geometry in real time. Let's begin by naming something essential. Your breath reflects and reinforces the shape of your thought field. When your thinking is sharp and fractured, your breath becomes shallow, segmented, vertical. When your thoughts expand and sequence with clarity, your breath drops low, moves laterally, and opens time. So we ask, what are you building when you breathe the way you do? If you never ask that, your system has been building blind structures, emotional rooms with no doors, thought corridors that spiral instead of resolve. Now you'll learn to breathe as a form of structural authorship. Let's trace this step by step. First, the inhale. Inhale is invitation. Inhale draws the field inward, not as contraction, but as concentration. It gathers presence, creates density. It sets dimensional tension, the pressure needed to hold form. Then the pause at the top. This is the threshold, a moment between worlds. It's the invisible door between thought and action, a still point where intention crystallizes. Then the exhale. Exhale is release. Exhale is design in motion. It expands the space, clears distortion. It sends your internal blueprint outward into the field. Breath is the bridge between your internal signal and the outer atmosphere. Here's where it becomes architectural. You can use breath to reshape attention, to shift emotion, to calibrate thought velocity, to recenter in spatial clarity. This isn't metaphor, it's function. Let's go deeper. There are 4 symbolic breath modes that correspond to different internal states. Grounding breath. Deep inhale through nose, slow exhale through mouth. Used to return attention to dimensional center when scattered. Symbol root. Clearing breath. Fast inhale, short hold, long open exhale. Used to move emotional residue out of the body. Symbol, wind through stone. Visioning breath. Equal inhale/exhale through nose with a floating pause. Used to create coherent inner space for visualization and signal reading. Symbol, still lake surface. Threshold breath. Short inhale, long hold, sudden exhale. Used when facing internal doorway moments, decisions, initiations, integrations. Symbol, archer's pull and release. Each of these breath structures creates a different shape inside the mind. Your system responds not just to breath volume, but to breath pattern geometry. This means you can use breath to choose which version of yourself becomes active. Let's practice. Close your eyes. Choose a breath mode. Let's begin with visioning breath. Inhale 4 counts. Exhale 4 counts. Pause not with tension, but with curiosity. Let that pause become a symbolic space, a chamber of possibility. Stay there briefly, then repeat. Notice, your thoughts begin to smooth. The room inside your awareness feels wider. Emotional tempo slows. Memory unravels from pressure. You've just shifted dimensional syntax using only breath. Now add intention, not as affirmation, a shape signal. Breathe in coherence. Hold presence. Breathe out clarity. Let the shape of that rhythm inform your posture, your thoughts, your emotion. You are now breathing a structure into being. Here's the truth. Every thought has a breath behind it. When you learn to shape the breath, you stop reacting to thought and start sculpting mental terrain. You stop being a passive experiencer of consciousness. You become the architect of its rhythm. And from that rhythm, new forms become accessible. So remember, breath is not just life. It's design, it's signal, it's authorship. Next, we will enter the realm of color as emotional and symbolic resonance, unlocking memory and identity through sensory calibration. Color is not aesthetic. Color is resonance code. Your system responds to color not as visual input, but as emotional signal, a sensory language that bypasses logic and speaks directly to the subconscious architecture of self. Each color holds a frequency. Each frequency carries memory. Each memory activates emotion. And emotion alters space. You are already reacting to color all day. But unless you read it consciously, you'll miss how your environment is shaping your emotional field. Not subtly, but structurally. Let's look deeper. Color enters your system through 3 channels. Optical, the literal sight of it. Associative, the memory or symbol linked to it. Energetic, the unconscious vibrational field it activates. Each channel creates a color field in your system, and that field is shape intelligence in motion. Think of it like this. When a certain color enters your field, it reformats emotional texture in real time. Red may activate urgency, embodiment, survival, or aggression, depending on what role red has played in your symbolic system. Blue may soften awareness, deepen reflection, or numb sensation, again, depending on your unique memory association matrix. The key is not what the color means universally, it's what it does in your field. So let's explore the color field meditation, a sensory recalibration practice that uses imagined color to access, shift, and resequence emotional layers. Begin. Sit in stillness. Close your eyes. Let your breath open, unforced. You are entering a space beneath language. Now let a color arise in your inner vision. Don't pick it. Let it arrive. Don't analyze. Feel. Now ask, where in my body does this color want to land? What temperature does it carry? What memory stirs behind it? Let the color expand. Let it move as it wishes. Spiraling, pulsing, hovering, filling. You're not visualizing. You're reading sensory syntax. Stay with the color. Now observe how your emotional state begins to respond. Does your breath change? Does time shift? Do thoughts slow or speed up? This is the color field realigning internal architecture. Now go deeper. Ask the color, what emotional pattern are you here to dissolve? What part of me have you come to remember? Let the answer arise not in words but in inner temperature. Then, slowly, gently, introduce a second color. Let it appear not by force, but as contrast or complement. Now observe how the first color reacts. Do they merge? Do they repel? Does the field fragment or stabilize? You are now working with symbolic sequencing, the language of the subconscious made visible through color. This isn't visualization for calm. It's design rehearsal. You're retraining your system to receive signal through symbolic overlay, and that signal shifts emotion, identity, and perception. Here's the final layer. Once the two colors have completed their movement, allow a third color to rise, the integrating tone. Let this tone fill your attention field. Let it stabilize the edges. Let it wrap your awareness in a resonance coding. This coding becomes your emotional climate for the day. You've not changed who you are. You've tuned how you experience yourself. This is sensory authorship. This is color as shape. This is dimension as design. Repeat this process regularly. You'll begin to see how your body responds to red on a Tuesday differently than it does on a Sunday. How blue interacts with grief after certain conversations. How yellow becomes integration after closure. How gray is not neutral, but a symbol of suspended transformation. You are reading your system through color, through frequency, through resonance. Next, we will listen to the space behind thought, sensory silence, and learn how to hear the architecture of what is not being said. Most people listen to sound. Fewer listen to words. Almost none listen to space. And yet, it's space, not sound, that holds the true signal. Between words, behind meaning, beneath noise, there is a room behind the room. A silent chamber underneath your thinking. It's not quiet in the usual sense. It's sensory silence, a field where presence is not reduced, but intensified. This field is alive. It hums. It receives. It shapes what comes next. But if your system is always filled with internal commentary, emotional rehearsal, and unresolved mental motion, you never hear it. You mistake silence for absence. But silence is actually origin. This is where thought begins before it takes form. Where emotional energy is noticed before it turns into reaction. Where signal speaks without language. To perceive this layer, you must learn to listen beyond content. You're not listening for meaning. You're listening for tone, temperature, texture, direction. That's the architecture of the silent field. Let's explore how. Every space, internal or external, carries a background frequency. It's the tone of the moment that continues when no one is speaking. It's the invisible environment behind sound. and it holds more data than any sentence ever could. When you become still enough, your system begins to receive this layer automatically. It's not hard. It's unfamiliar. The first impulse is to fill the silence. Don't let the silence wrap around you. Notice, does it feel clean or cluttered? Is it dense or soft? Is it pulsing or frozen? This isn't imagination. It's perceptual refinement. Most people miss this layer because they assume perception means engagement. But perception at its highest level means reception without reaction. Now let's bring this into real practice. Sit still. Let your body soften, but stay awake. Feel the space around you, not visually but spatially. Listen to the tone of the room, not the noises, the tone. What color does this tone carry? What weight? What movement? Now notice, where does your awareness go automatically? Forward? Downward? Backward? Sideways? That vector is a field indicator. It tells you where the signal is flowing. Your job is not to control it. Your job is to attune. Now quiet the inner dialogue, not by suppression, by redirection. Shift your focus from thought to field texture. What does this moment feel like before you think about it? That's the real listening. The longer you stay here, the more you start to hear things that don't arrive through sound. You begin to receive shape, movement, intuition, message, but not through words. This is the room behind the room. It's the pre-event architecture that forms the frame for what's about to happen. And once you tune to it, you stop being surprised by events. You begin to sense them arriving, not in clairvoyance, but in field tone. You can walk into a conversation and feel where it wants to go. Not because of logic, but because the field already holds the direction. You can enter a creative space and know whether it's ready for emergence or still holding interference. You become a field reader. Let's go one level deeper. Sensory silence is also where your signal becomes loudest, not to others, but to you. Because without the mental noise, your core frequency stops fighting for space. It simply is. And when your system stays in that listening mode long enough, signal memory returns. You remember who you were before the storyline. You remember how space felt when you weren't performing. You remember the tone of your own coherence. This is not stillness for its own sake. The stillness as realignment. And from that alignment, clarity flows. Here's your integration practice. Spend 5 minutes a day in field listening. No agenda, just presence. Ask, what is the tone of this space? Where is it pulling me? What thought arises first? And from where? You're not interpreting. You're feeling the signal source. Over time, this becomes automatic. In high-pressure situations, your first instinct will no longer be, what do I say? It will be, what is this space asking for? That's when silence becomes power. That's when presence becomes design. Next, we move into a daily ritual for decoding your inner climate, the emotional weather report, and how to map emotion as atmosphere, not as identity. Emotion is not static. It shifts like climate. It rolls in like weather. It builds, breaks, clears, and returns. If you treat emotion like identity, you become the storm. But if you treat it like weather, you become the observer, the navigator, the meteorologist of your own inner sky. This shift changes everything. Because now, instead of saying, I am anxious, you say, there is anxiety in the field. You remove self from condition. You remove narrative from texture. You become dimensionally literate in your emotional atmosphere. Let's build the ritual. Each day, before external input, before digital exposure, you take a moment to read your field. Not your thoughts, not your to-do list, not your body pain, your emotional climate. Here's the method. Step 1. Close your eyes. Sit still. Let breath rise naturally. Drop attention from mind to field. Let the space inside you become landscape. Now ask, what is the current weather? Not how do I feel, but what weather system am I in? Your answers will vary. Dense fog, confusion, narrative looping, lightning in the distance, pending conflict, heavy humidity, emotional saturation, clear sky with cold wind, intellectual clarity without warmth, tornado overhead, pressure from unresolved decision-making. This is not metaphor for metaphor's sake. This is symbolic accuracy. Your system responds better to emotional shape than emotional label. Once you've named the weather, ask, what's the pressure system? Is something moving toward you or away? Is the tension rising, holding, breaking? This determines the emotional tempo of your day. Step 2. Determine movement strategy. Not all weather requires action. Some requires holding the line. Some calls for internal shelter. Some invites engagement with clarity and softness. Based on the climate, choose one of the following. Anchor, ground attention, reduce input. Flow, allow the emotion to move without labeling. Redirect, introduce symbolic gesture or breath to shift direction. Wait, do nothing, watch, track for pattern. You're no longer reacting, you're forecasting. Step 3. Symbolic reinforcement. Choose a color, gesture, or object that represents how you want to be in this weather. Not change it, but relate to it differently. A hand over the heart, a red scarf, a still gaze, a glass of cold water held with both hands. You've now mapped the emotion. You've named the system. You've chosen your stance. And most importantly, you didn't collapse into "I am this." You translated, tracked, and responded. This ritual doesn't erase storms. It builds trust in your field awareness. Because emotion isn't enemy. Emotion is weather in motion. It delivers information. It reminds you that no internal state is final, and that symbolic literacy is what turns reaction into rhythm. Next, we activate deeper layers of memory through geometric patterning, accessing archetypal intelligence stored not in words, but in sacred shapes. Memory is not stored in sentences. It's stored in shapes, patterns, curves, angles of experience that imprint the field long before language catches up. To access deeper layers of your inner landscape, you must step beyond chronological recall. You must learn to work with geometric memory, the symbolic structures that hold core experiences in encoded form. You already do this intuitively. You remember a betrayal as a fracture, a split line between trust and event. You recall joy as an open circle, a moment complete unto itself. You carry fear as a jagged shape, sharp, enclosed, unpredictable. These are not metaphors. These are the actual forms emotion takes inside your system. You don't just remember what happened. You remember how the moment was shaped. And if you learn to read those shapes, you unlock the codes that formed your identity. Let's begin with a foundational truth. Every significant emotional imprint lives in your field as a shape structure. Not because it's visual, because it's dimensional. The mind stores sequences, but the body and field store spatial signatures. Let's explore how. Close your eyes. Recall a moment that defined something about you, not from the head, but from the chest. Now ask, what shape is this memory? Don't force a symbol. Let your system show you. Is it a triangle? A spiral? A cube? An incomplete arc? Now feel what the shape is doing. Is it holding? Repeating? Blocking? Extending? You are now accessing archetypal geometry, the underlying form that holds your emotional data. This shape is not neutral. It governs how energy moves inside you. A closed triangle often holds decision tension, 3 unresolved forces competing. A spiral may indicate repetition that seeks resolution. A jagged line can point to fragmentation in identity memory. Once you name the shape, it becomes readable. And once it's readable, it can be rewritten. Here's how. Step 1. Feel the shape fully. Don't fix. Feel. Let it expand in your awareness. Let it become dimensional, occupying inner space. Step 2. Track the theme it represents. Ask, what core emotional narrative is embedded in this shape? Don't answer with words. Feel the emotional thread moving through the lines, angles, or curves. Step 3. Introduce an alternate geometry. You're not replacing the shape. You're offering a countersymbol, an energetic suggestion. If the original shape is rigid, offer a soft curve. If it's fragmented, offer cohesion. If it's stuck, introduce motion. Let the two shapes interact. Overlay, merge, rotate, dissolve, align. You're now performing geometric alchemy, translating unresolved pattern into new structural potential. This isn't imagination. It's design work. And the shifts you make here echo through your thought, your mood, your posture. Shapes carry field logic. And when you change the logic, the narrative that depended on it dissolves. Let's go further. Sacred geometry, circle, triangle, square, spiral, isn't sacred because it's old. It's sacred because it's fundamental. These are not decorations. They are codes, pure forms that your system recognizes even without teaching. Each shape has a function. Circle, wholeness, completion, eternal return. Triangle, tension, choice, triangulation of perspective. Square, foundation, structure, stability. Spiral, evolution, recursion, emergent movement. Line, direct intention, clarity, division. Point, pure signal, origin, stillness. When you feel stuck, ask, what shape would bring clarity to this state? Then breathe with that shape. Visualize it in your body. Trace it in the air with your finger. Feel it settle into the field. You're giving your system a new structural template, a new way to hold experience. And over time, these templates stack. They become your internal architecture. One final layer. Sometimes the shape reveals itself in dreams, in spontaneous images, in gestures your body repeats without knowing why. These are memory codes trying to surface, not as content, as form. Pay attention to them. What shape does your hand make when you're nervous? What position do you always sit in when processing? What symbols do you doodle when distracted? They're not random. They are pattern residue, and each holds insight. Geometric memory isn't about design. It's about access. And access creates options. And options create freedom. Next, we move into the technique of simulated self, running different identity versions through internal future environments to determine which one matches the authentic signal. You are not fixed. You are modular. And within you live many possible selves, each carrying a different tone, desire, posture, and timeline. But most people mistake habit for truth. They assume the self they've been is the self they are. And so they repeat life not by circumstance but by identity inertia. Here's the alternative. You build a simulation chamber inside your awareness. And you begin to run identity prototypes through imagined scenarios. Not as fantasy, as signal testing. You're not asking, what do I want? You're asking, which version of me holds coherence in that future field? Let's begin. Close your eyes. Breathe into stillness. Feel your baseline signal, the one we accessed earlier. Now bring forward a future vision. Not as ambition, but as tone. Maybe it's a creative life, a relationship, a leadership space, a sovereign solitude. Let the vision form in symbolic clarity, color, shape, texture, atmosphere. Now place version 1 of yourself into that space. The version you usually bring into the world. Watch what happens. Does that self hold shape in the vision? Or does the field reject, blur, or distort it? Watch without judgment. You're running code. Now bring forward version 2. Perhaps a braver self, a softer self, clearer self. Watch again. Does this version breathe well in that space? Does the timeline hold? Do you feel resonance or friction? Now bring forward a third version, one you haven't fully lived yet. Let it be unfamiliar. Let it surprise you. This is the simulated self exercise. You are testing fit, not fantasy. You're looking for signal compatibility between your projected field and the self required to live inside it. And once you feel alignment, even for a moment, pause, breathe. You've found an identity key. Now ask, what posture does that version hold? What tone does it speak with? What emotion is primary in its field? Write that down. This becomes your integration blueprint. Here's the next layer. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about activating the dormant architecture already inside you, the parts that match your true signal, but haven't yet been lived. And now that you've located that version, you can begin to practice it. Not as performance, as design rehearsal. In daily decisions, ask, What would this version say here? What would this version do with silence? How does this version hold boundaries? You're not faking. You're testing architecture. And soon, what was simulation becomes actual self. That's dimensional design. You don't manifest a new life by forcing change. You align signal with version. And you let that version take its rightful place in your timeline. Next, we'll use sound as emotional architecture and learn how harmonic patterning can recalibrate the body's dimensional coherence. Sound is more than sensation. It is structure in motion, cuts through narrative. It bypasses logic. It reaches the architecture of your inner terrain and rearranges it, not through thought, but through vibrational intelligence. You've already felt this. One chord can dissolve tension. A single ambient tone can slow your heart rate. Disordered noise scrambles your clarity. Harmonic order restores it. This isn't psychological. It's dimensional sculpting through acoustic form. Sound mapping is the process of using intentional tones to reshape internal space. Not as music, not as entertainment, but as calibration protocol for your field. Let's build the foundation. Every mood has a tone. Every identity state has a frequency band. Every emotional pattern has a harmonic residue. When you become aware of these tonal structures, you can begin to select sound not for taste, but for realignment. This is frequency sculpting. It works like this. You don't listen to sound. You let sound map your system. You allow the tone to locate jaggedness. You allow resonance to reorganize internal chaos. You allow silence between notes to amplify signal. Let's explore how to do this intentionally. Step 1. Choose your tone environment. Do not choose based on genre or mood. Choose based on geometry of sound. For grounding, low, continuous tones with minimal variation. These stabilize the lower emotional strata and slow time. For unlocking, slow evolving drones with subtle overtone layers. These lift suppressed emotion into awareness gently. For focusing, binaural textures with rhythmic oscillation. These create internal coherence between hemispheres. For dissolving narrative, disordered ambient clusters with space between them. These disrupt looping thought and allow re-entry into presence. The key is to match the field need with the acoustic structure. Step 2. Become the chamber. Don't listen to the sound. Let the sound pass through you. Sit still. Let your body become a resonator. Breathe slowly. Receive without analysis. Now ask, where does the sound land? What part of me softens? Where does resistance rise? This is mapping. You're reading how sound interacts with shape. You may notice, certain tones cause temperature shifts. Particular frequencies evoke memory. Silence between tones feels more potent than the tones themselves. That's not incidental. That's your architecture responding to harmonic input. Now add intention but not through thought. Use gesture, breath, or posture as reinforcement. If the sound is descending, let your shoulders drop. If it is widening, extend your awareness laterally. If it is rising, lift your chest, not with ego but with spaciousness. You are now co-sculpting with sound. Step 3. Silence as scaffold. End your sound session with pure silence. Let the echo of the tone remain. Let the resonance rearrange your thought field. Notice what's changed, not emotionally, structurally. Do you feel wider, more sequenced, less entangled? That's the residue of frequency sculpting. It doesn't fix you. It reorders you subtly, precisely. Here's one advanced technique. Layer inner sound with outer tone. As the external tone plays, begin to generate internal sound, not through vocalization, but through imagined resonance. Hum silently in your chest. Feel a note in your spine. Imagine a frequency spiraling behind your eyes. This activates internal coherence, a mirror of the external sound field. The result? A fully tuned instrument. You as a harmonic space. And that harmonic alignment changes how you think, how you feel, how space around you responds. Because coherence is not aesthetic. It's magnetic. One final layer. If you ever feel scattered, unclear, or emotionally flattened, don't seek answers. Seek tone. and let tone reformat the question. Next, we learn to see without vision, how visual syntax allows you to read symbolic imagery with your inner sight and interpret pre-thought architecture. You have two kinds of sight, one that responds to light, and one that responds to signal. This second sight doesn't need eyes. It doesn't need light. It doesn't require memory. It works by symbolic syntax, the internal language of shape, form, and dimensional gesture that precedes verbal thought. This is the sight you use in dreams, the sight you access in deep meditation, the sight that shows you what's becoming before it arrives. And this sight can be trained, not to fantasize, not to imagine, but to see through signal. Here's how it works. Every thought begins as a visual imprint, not of imagery, but of shape intention. Before a belief is spoken, it forms as structure. Before an emotion is labeled, it moves as color, tone, or symbolic form. When you train your inner sight, you begin to witness these patterns in real time. You begin to see the room behind the room. You begin to read the pre-narrative layer. Let's begin the training. Step 1. Still the input stream. Close the eyes. Withdraw attention from the external field. Don't force quiet. Just let the outer vision go dark. Step 2. Turn on inner space. You're not imagining. You're allowing the space behind your eyes to become dimensional. Ask, what is already here? Don't inject imagery. Let images arise. Usually they arrive as shapes, colors, environments, symbols, flickering textures. You're not controlling. You're watching the signal field unfold. Now ask, what part of my life does this imagery represent? Let the answer come in emotional tone, not language. Does the spiral relate to confusion? Does the gray field represent stagnation? Does the distant doorway point to an opportunity being resisted? This is syntax. Each image is a sentence fragment in the language of your symbolic field. Step 3. Refine the lens. You now begin to consciously engage the image. Approach it mentally. Shift the camera. Zoom in. Move around it. As you do this, new perspectives arise. New emotional tones surface. You're not hallucinating. You're interacting with your dimensional interior. This interaction is revealing your inner architecture in motion. Now ask the image to transform. Let the spiral open. Let the fog lift. Let the cube rotate. This isn't entertainment. It's pre-thought recalibration. As the shape shifts, your system receives new instructions. Silently, deeply. Your attention reorganizes. Your emotions shift orientation. Your timeline adjusts its vector. Here's the final movement. Anchor the imagery. Don't let it fade too quickly. Give it gesture. Draw it in the air. Trace it on paper. Mark it on your skin with fingertip. You've now taken something invisible and made it legible. Visual syntax becomes designable once seen. That's the point. This isn't visualization in the popular sense. It's internal cartography. And over time, you'll begin to see patterns repeat. The same cave when you feel pressure. The same broken bridge when a choice is unfinished. The same window when your signal is clear. This becomes your visual dictionary. Unique to you, impossible to fake. You are not learning a new language. You are remembering the one you were born fluent in, the visual syntax of emotional architecture. Next, we translate emotion into tactile form, learning to fold feelings into symbolic shape with emotional origami. You are not overwhelmed by emotion. You are overwhelmed by unfolded structure. Emotion in its raw state is formless. But the moment it's given shape, even symbolically, it becomes readable, movable, knowable. That's where emotional origami begins. Not as performance, as dimensional translation. When you feel something intensely and don't know what to do with it, it's usually because the emotion hasn't been folded into a shape that your system can hold. This isn't metaphorical. It's tactile. The body understands shape before concept, and this process speaks directly to your somatic intelligence. Let's explore how to do it. The first step, detect the emotional material. Not by labeling, by locating. Feel where the emotion lives in your body right now. Is it behind your sternum? In your hands? In your throat? Behind your eyes? Now pause. and ask, what texture is this? Not what the emotion is, what it feels like as substance. Is it rough, fluid, jagged, sticky, heavy, hot? You are learning to read emotion as tactile signal, not psychological content. Now choose your metaphor. You are about to fold the emotion into symbolic form. Ask your system, if this emotion were an object, what would it be? Examples might arise: a rusted metal cube, a crumpled silk cloth, a shard of glass, a cloud dripping color, a tightly wound spring. Don't judge. Let it be irrational. This is symbolic intelligence surfacing. Now the fold. Using your hands, physically or mentally, begin to shape the object. You are not trying to erase the emotion. You are giving it container and contour. Perhaps you smooth the metal, or unwrap the spring, or gently twist the cloth into a spiral, or cradle the shard until it glows instead of cuts. As you fold, breathe slowly. With each breath, notice, has the emotional weight shifted? Has it become more organized? Has the symbolic object changed form? What you're doing is dimensional origami, folding emotion into metaphor so the system can hold it as design, not disorder. Let's add a gesture. As the shape becomes clearer, move your hands to match it. Let the body speak the form. A cup, a wave, a blade, a spiral. You've now translated emotional energy into kinetic structure. That movement completes the loop. Emotion was raw. Now it is folded. The field is reorganized. This is not imagination. It's signal transformation. Let's integrate. Once the shape feels stable, do one of the following. Place it symbolically in a pocket, pouch, or container in your mind. Offer it to an imagined landscape: water, sky, fire, earth. Let it float into the space behind your eyes. Watch it dissolve or change. Each action gives your nervous system a resolution pathway. And with repetition, your body begins to trust. Emotion does not mean overwhelm. Emotion means material ready for structuring. Over time, you'll notice repeated shapes that match recurring emotional states. New emotional content arriving already in form. Faster resolution, deeper clarity, less inner noise. Because you've given your field a language of shape. And that language becomes the way your system communicates in real time. Here's an advanced refinement. After folding and shaping the emotion, assign it a color. What hue does the folded form hold? That color becomes a resonance cue, a frequency you can work with later in breath, in visualization, in space design. You are not bypassing. You are translating. You are giving your subconscious mind symbols it understands. This is the real art of emotional origami. Turning intensity into structure. Turning overwhelm into signal. Turning energy into clarity. You don't process emotion. You shape it. And shaped emotion becomes readable, usable, wise. Next, we move into archetypal integration. Decoding the mythic signatures hidden inside your everyday life and learning to recognize your story as symbolic design. You are not living a random sequence of events. You are inhabiting an archetype, or more accurately, being inhabited by one. Not as fiction, not as fantasy, as mythic architecture embedded in emotion, pattern, and storyline. Archetypes are not characters. They are dimensional patterns, timeless blueprints that shape perception, behavior, relationship, and identity formation. And when you learn to recognize the archetype shaping your experience, confusion becomes clarity. Reaction becomes rhythm. Narrative becomes map. You begin to see your life not as chaos or coincidence, but as symbolic progression, a movement through archetypal thresholds. Let's begin with a simple premise. An archetype is not a person you play. It's a frequency that plays through you when the field conditions match. You don't choose the archetype. It activates when internal and external systems resonate with its pattern. The warrior arises in pressure. The healer awakens in presence. The shadow surfaces when denial accumulates. The seer arrives in stillness. The trickster emerges to break rigidity. The lover calls through softness, through risk, through undoing. These are not roles. They are signal templates. Let's locate the one moving through you now. Sit still. Close your eyes. Ask your system, what archetype is whispering behind my current experience? Don't answer with intellect. Feel for resonance. What image appears? What color arrives? What emotion thickens? Perhaps a path opens in the woods. A crown appears above your brow. A child hides behind your chest. A sword presses into your hand. A flame dances in the dark, watching you. These are archetypal markers. They speak not in logic, but in symbolic presence. Now ask, what is this pattern asking of me? Is it pushing for decision? Calling for retreat? Inviting risk? Unraveling protection? Demanding honesty? This is not storytelling. It's dimensional listening. You're attuning to the voice beneath the voice, the mythic current shaping your behavior and emotion from the inside out. Now name it. Don't reduce it to cliché. Feel its name through tone, not language. Is it the threshold holder? The internal architect? The flame keeper? The wild mirror? The quiet sovereign? This name is not for others. It's for you. A marker of the shape you are currently wearing in time. And with that awareness, your relationship to life changes. Challenges become initiations. Patterns become chapters. Frustrations become symbolic cues. You begin to ask, what archetypal energy am I resisting right now? What archetype does this person or moment represent for me? What energy wants to be released through this storyline? This brings you into narrative literacy, the ability to read life symbolically, not literally. Let's anchor it further. Take one recurring issue in your life. Now ask, what archetype has been playing out in that loop? Is the rescuer always showing up? Is the invisible child pattern still running? Is the hero always on the brink but never arriving? Name it, witness it, then choose to complete it. Not by force, by symbolic gesture. If the archetype is outdated, let it retire. If the archetype is emerging, let it speak. Make space. And as you shift, your external life will mirror that transformation, because your field resonance changes storyline frequency. One final layer. Every archetype lives in emotional posture. If you're unsure what's active, observe your body. The protector clenches. The sovereign rises. The seeker leans forward. The witness softens backward. The alchemist rotates inward and outward simultaneously. These postures are not random. They are embodied signal codes. And when you shift your posture intentionally, you shift which archetype is allowed to speak through you. You are not fixed. You are a dynamic mythic interface. Learn to read that. Learn to live that. Next, we map space through symbolic action, learning to walk through psychological walls by shifting internal layout and mental architecture. There are walls inside your mind. You've felt them. The invisible edge when a conversation tightens. The inner freeze when a memory surfaces. The sudden halt when a dream feels too large to enter. But these aren't real barriers. They are spatial decisions you forgot you made. Psychological walls are not obstructions. They are architectures of defense, habit, and identity preservation. They're designed to keep certain versions of you from walking into spaces you once believed were dangerous. But belief can expire. And when it does, the architecture built on top of it must dissolve. Otherwise, you're living inside a floor plan designed by a younger, smaller self. This chapter teaches you how to hack those layouts, not with willpower, but with symbolic movement inside mental space. Let's begin. Your mind is not abstract. It's spatial. Every emotion has a direction. Every thought has a location. Every memory has a coordinate in your field. You're just not trained to walk it like a room. Let's shift that. Step 1. Locate the wall. Think of an emotional pattern you can't seem to move through. Not something minor, something repetitive. Something that feels like, I always stop here. Now close your eyes. Bring the situation or memory into view. And ask your body, where is the edge? You may feel it in your chest like a pressure pressing inward, as a weight behind your head, as a vague fog blocking your forward motion, as a sideways pull into avoidance. Whatever direction it arises from, note it. That's your spatial cue. You're not stuck emotionally. You're stuck spatially. Step 2. Map the room. Ask, what kind of space am I inside? Let the image form. A hallway with no end. A locked room with no windows. A staircase that repeats. A dim cave with echo. A corridor that loops. You are not visualizing for art. You are reading symbolic architecture. Now feel for the wall. What is it made of? Stone? Fog? Light? Iron? Words? That texture holds the emotional logic of the block. Stone equals solidity of old belief. Fog equals confusion without direction. Iron equals resistance built on pain. Words equals mental narrative loops. Step 3. Introduce symbolic tools. Now that you've read the structure, shift it using symbolic precision. Not by force, by design. Choose a tool your body responds to. A light hammer. A key made of sound. A compass that points to warmth. A doorway drawn with breath. A fluid you pour into cracks. Use this tool in your inner space. Let it interact with the wall. Watch the material shift. You may see it break, melt, dissolve, unfold, lift. Don't control it. Just observe and follow. This isn't fantasy. It's psychological spatial hacking. You're changing the internal architecture through symbolic interaction, which reorganizes emotional energy in real time. Step 4. Walkthrough. Once the wall changes form, move forward. Literally. In your inner space, take 3 steps past where the block used to be. Notice how your system reacts. Does it relax? Tighten? Celebrate? Protest? All reactions are valid. It means you've changed the map. This movement becomes the new internal route. And next time that situation arises in real life, your body remembers the alternate layout. Because the subconscious believes what it experiences, not what it's told. One more layer. Every wall you face was once a door. A choice not taken. A truth not spoken. A version not lived. When you walk through it, you don't just free yourself. You retrieve the self that was left behind it. This is reintegration. This is space as story. Here's an advanced application. Design intentional rooms inside your awareness. A room of clarity. A chamber of softness. A bridge of decision-making. A stairwell of memory descent. Visit these places in meditation. Feel their geometry, their texture, their gravity. You're building a psychological palace. One where your emotional flow isn't trapped by invisible walls, but directed by deliberate architecture. Your mind becomes a space of choice, not limitation. Next, we enter attention as blueprint, understanding how what you focus on constructs your inner floor plan, moment by moment. Attention is not neutral. It builds. It sculpts. It decides the shape and thickness of your reality. Most people think of attention as a spotlight, something you aim. But it's not a spotlight. It's a brush, a chisel, a blueprint generator. Whatever you give attention to begins to take form inside you. Not just in thought, in structure. This chapter reframes attention as the architectural force behind identity, emotion, and time perception. Let's begin here. Where your attention goes, space rearranges. This means when you give sustained attention to a certain memory, you're building a room around it. You're carving out mental floor space for that emotion to live. And every time you revisit it, the walls get thicker. The room becomes more real. So the question is never just, what am I thinking about? The real question is, what inner architecture am I building right now through my attention? Let's explore how to work with this. Step 1. Notice your current blueprint. Right now, pause. Close your eyes. Scan your awareness. Where is most of your attention going? An unresolved loop? A future projection? Someone else's energy? Internal critique? A creative vision? Whatever it is, feel its weight, its direction, its dimensional footprint. That's your current build site. You're investing attention as construction material. Step 2. Evaluate the structure. Ask, is this architecture supportive or constrictive? Does this build openness or repetition? Does it feel expansive or tight? You're not judging. You're assessing the design outcome. Step 3. Redirect the blueprint. Let's shift attention intentionally. Choose a symbol to anchor your awareness. A circle of gold light. A soft expanding field behind the eyes. A spiral centered in the chest. A bridge stretching into possibility. Let that symbol be your design seed. Now focus on it. Not with intensity, with presence. Feel how the internal space starts to shift around it. Walls move. Edges blur. Time slows or quickens. You're not visualizing. You're constructing. This symbol becomes the center of a new room, a space that hosts your next version. Step 4. Apply attention rhythmically. Most people focus with rigidity, but attention, like architecture, needs rhythm to breathe. Try this. Give attention for 5 seconds. Release it for 5 seconds. Repeat. This creates pulse architecture, a pattern of construction and rest. The result? Your inner space stabilizes. It stops feeling rigid. It becomes adaptive. And that adaptability creates choice, the core function of dimensional literacy. Final movement. Bring awareness to your entire field, not just the point of focus. Now hold attention like a wide, soft lens. Feel how this changes your identity posture. You go from doing to holding, from thinking to shaping. This is attention as architecture. And the architecture you shape today becomes the space you live inside tomorrow. So choose wisely. Where your attention rests is where your inner world builds. Next, we learn to design timelines from the inside, weaving narrative, emotional tone, and identity signal into a new map of becoming. You are not trapped in a timeline. You are woven into one. And anything woven can be unwoven. Rethreaded. Designed. Your life isn't a straight line of events. It's a layered loom, made of symbolic threads, emotional textures, and identity pulses that run beneath what you call memory. But most people live as the character inside a thread. They forget they're the weaver, the one who chooses which patterns to repeat, which to interrupt, which to expand. Timeline weaving is the act of becoming consciously entangled with your own story, not through belief, but through structure. Let's explore what that means. Step 1. See narrative as pattern, not plot. Your timeline isn't defined by the things that happened. It's shaped by the emotional syntax beneath those things. When you begin to track your emotional recurrences, not just events, you start to see the real design. Examples. Every job ends the same way. Certain types of people always return. Inspiration fades at the same threshold. Visibility causes collapse. Control keeps reappearing. These are not flaws. They are threads. And threads can be rewoven, but not until they are seen. Let's track one. Choose a repeating pattern in your life. Not just something annoying, something emotionally magnetic. Something that feels like it builds your character even as it frustrates you. Now close your eyes. Feel into that pattern. Don't ask why. Ask, what thread color does this carry? Let it speak symbolically. It may feel red and electric, blue and slow, black and dense, gold and sharp, green and looping. That's the signature thread. Your system already knows what this frequency looks like. Now trace it backward. Where else has it shown up? A memory from childhood, a conversation that defined your tone, a habit that follows you invisibly, an unfinished version of self still looping behind you. Now trace it forward. Where is this thread pulling you now? You'll begin to feel directionality. It's not random. It's woven in tension, even if unconscious. You've just mapped a narrative structure, and now you can choose how to interact with it. Step 2. Introduce a new thread. You don't erase old threads. You overlay them with a new signal, one that carries a different emotional syntax. How? Choose an emotion you want to experience in place of the old pattern. Not as a desire, as a thread color. Let's say, sovereignty feels like deep emerald. Creativity feels like violet smoke. Clarity feels like silver lattice. Warmth feels like glowing amber. Trust feels like soft sky blue. Now see this new thread. Feel it between your fingers. Then begin to weave it backward. Imagine laying it beside the old thread in past memories. Not to deny the old, to companion it. You're saying to your system, yes, that happened. And now a new thread joins the loom. Feel that change. There is a difference between revision and weaving. Weaving says, I acknowledge all that was, and I choose what else enters this design. Now weave it forward. Bring the new thread into your projected timeline. Not as wish, as structure. What happens to your decisions? What shifts in posture? What emotional tempo begins to form? This is not future fantasy. This is thread alignment. Step 3, anchor the weave. This is where most people fall out. They try to live a new life on an old loom. Anchor the thread through movement. Gesture that repeats the new thread's rhythm. Sound a hum, tone, or word that carries the frequency. Texture. A piece of fabric. An object that holds the symbolic weave. Breath. Inhale the thread in, exhale the old one out. Gaze. Hold a soft, steady stare as you feel the thread settle. You're not manifesting. You're coding the space of becoming. Because timelines are not chosen with logic. They're chosen through coherence. If your internal threads contradict, your field collapses. But when they align, a new path opens silently, irrevocably. One final awareness. Every time you think of the past, you touch the loom again. So touch it with clarity. Touch it with design. Touch it with new thread in hand. You're not the character anymore. You are the weaver. And the story will shift when the threads do. Next, we explore how emotion points not inward, but forward. How to use your inner pull as a directional compass of spatial guidance. You've been taught to ask what an emotion means. You've rarely been taught to ask where an emotion is pointing. But emotion is not just signal. It's vector. It carries directionality. It bends time. It moves space. And if you learn to feel its pull, rather than analyze its content, it becomes a compass far more precise than logic. Let's reframe emotion entirely. Emotion is a spatial indicator. A live coordinate system that tells you where your attention, your choices, and your timelines are aligned or misaligned. Think of it like this. Longing stretches your timeline forward. Anxiety fractures time into static snapshots. Joy pulls you into present immersion. Guilt folds the timeline backward. Anger compresses the space around your identity. Wonder expands the space between moments. These are not poetic musings. They are literal movement cues if you learn to read them. Let's begin. Step 1. Choose an emotion present in your system now. Don't label it immediately. Feel it as movement inside your space. Where is it pulling? Forward into action or desire. Backward into regret or memory. Inward into self-inquiry. Outward into others' expectations. Downward into grounding or collapse. Upward into expansion or dissociation. This is your emotional compass vector. You now have directionality, not meaning movement. Step 2. Interpret the vector. Ask, what does this direction suggest about what I'm resisting or reaching for? Does the pull align with the vision I'm weaving? Is this movement asking me to go towards something or away from something else? Again, stay in the body. Don't narrate. Feel the trajectory. You're reading emotion as field geometry. Step 3. Symbolize the compass. Give the directional emotion a visual metaphor. A golden thread pulling forward. A heavy anchor dropping downward. A soft magnet drawing to the left. A sharp gust pushing from behind. This symbolism activates navigational clarity. You're no longer just feeling. You're orienting. Now make a micro-adjustment. Physically shift your posture in response to the direction. If being pulled forward, lean into it slightly. If being compressed inward, open your chest. If being pulled downward, exhale into your feet. If being scattered outward, draw hands to center. This reinforces the emotional compass in form, not just thought. You're aligning vector with gesture, which stabilizes direction. Step 4. Decide from the field. Now ask, if I followed this emotional vector without story, what would it have me do? Write it, not with justification, with clarity. That action is your next coherent movement. Even if subtle, even if symbolic, you are now navigating through emotional directionality, not analyzing through emotional content. Final insight. When you stop asking, why do I feel this? And start asking, Where is this feeling pulling me? Your entire identity interface transforms. You become directional, not reactive. You become attuned, not controlled. Emotion becomes space you move through, not something that moves through you uncontrollably. And that is dimensional intelligence at its core. Next, we pull back the veil on intuition and begin reverse engineering its architecture through feeling, timing, and symbolic convergence. Intuition is not magic. It's not mystery. It's architecture firing faster than your thinking mind can process. You don't need to trust it blindly. You need to learn how to reverse engineer it, to trace it back to its origin and understand the signal map that generated it. Because intuition is not a feeling. It's a field event. It arises when multiple forms of input, symbolic, emotional, temporal, sensory, converge into a nonlinear knowing. And this knowing isn't random. It follows rules, dimensional ones. Let's start by making this clear. Intuition is a synthesis of signal streams. These streams include emotional syntax, spatial awareness, symbolic resonance, subtle timing shifts, narrative pattern detection, somatic micromovements, environmental field tone. When these data points converge, they trigger a recognition in the body. And that recognition is what we call a gut feeling, a pull, or a knowing. But if you pause and slow it down, you can track how it formed. Let's begin the practice. Step 1. Catch a recent intuitive hit. Think of a moment where you just knew something. You couldn't explain it. You felt it instantly. Now, instead of validating or invalidating the result, trace the architecture. Ask, what exact body sensation arose first? Where was your attention pointed just before the knowing landed? Did a shape, symbol, or image flash internally? What changed in the tone of the space around you? Did your breath pause, deepen, or shift? You're tracking the signal trail. This is reverse engineering, not the content of the intuition, but the mechanics of its arrival. Step 2. Identify the active signal layers. As you replay the moment, ask, was there an emotional vector? E.g., an inner pull forward or a contraction? Did something symbolic align? E.g., someone's words echoed something internal. Was there a time distortion? E.g., the moment felt slowed or thickened. Did your field posture change? E.g., you became hyper-attuned or oddly calm. These are the dimensional coordinates of intuition. It didn't arise from nowhere. It came from multi-layered alignment. Now ask, did your rational mind try to override it? That override is often where dissonance begins. The intuition fires from the field. The narrative center doubts it. And the signal weakens, not because it was wrong, but because it lost coherence under scrutiny. Step 3. Create an intuition blueprint. This is your personal map. Write down, what body cues tend to accompany true signal? What environmental markers show up? What emotions cluster around real knowing? What timing textures are present? What happens when it's fear masquerading as intuition? Now compare. You'll begin to notice patterns. For instance, true intuition feels silent, neutral, or clean, even when urgent. False signal often feels noisy, anxious, or rehearsed. True intuition isn't driven by should. It's shaped by resonance. False signal tends to loop in the mind, demanding validation. This is not about judgment. It's about dimensional clarity. Step 4. Test in micro-decisions. Don't wait for life-changing moments. Practice by tuning into subtle choices. Where to walk today. Which conversation to initiate. When to pause versus speak. Which idea carries the cleanest pull. Let your body tell you before your mind explains it. Notice the drop in your chest, the light in your hands, the calm pause before action, the expansion of space around a yes. You're teaching your system to notice its own alignment architecture. And the more you practice, the more precise your inner tuning becomes. Intuition doesn't improve by trust. It improves by signal discernment. Final layer. Every true intuitive hit carries a symbolic fingerprint. Over time, you'll see that certain metaphors or colors accompany your real guidance. A golden thread when timing aligns. a clear circle when something is complete, a soft bell tone when it's safe, a blue current when it's a yes. These become your intuitive lexicon, and when tracked, they reveal a guidance system more refined than logic can offer. Next, we turn memory into myth, learning how to reauthor the past through symbolic reframing and dimensional syntax. Memory is not fact. It's form. It's not what happened. It's how what happened was shaped in your field, emotionally and symbolically. And because it was shaped, it can be reshaped. Reauthoring memory isn't denial. It's design. It's the process of lifting a past experience out of its old emotional scaffolding and placing it within a new symbolic frame. This doesn't change the event. It changes the architecture of meaning that determines what that event does inside you now. Let's begin with this truth. Memory is a living shape, and every time you recall it, you interact with it again. You rethread it. You recode it. So instead of reactivating pain, regret, shame, or nostalgia unconsciously, you can turn memory into myth. And myth doesn't mean false. Myth means symbolically accurate, emotionally true, energetically useful, narratively aligned. Step 1. Choose a memory that still echoes. Not the worst thing, not the best, just something unresolved, something that holds a loop, something that still steals presence when it surfaces. Now close your eyes. Bring the memory forward. But this time, don't watch the people or events. Watch the space around the event. What does it look like? Tight room, a corridor without light, a wide field under gray sky, a staircase that spirals, a mirror cracking. That space is the symbolic map of how your system filed the event. You're not visualizing. You're reading the field structure of your memory. Step 2. Name the emotional shape. What did the memory form in your emotional field? A loop, a weight, a fracture, a mask, a seal. This emotional shape is more true than the story, because it determines how the story continues to live inside you. Now give the memory a symbolic name. Not a sentence, a title. Examples: the time the wall grew teeth, the silence that froze the room, the moment the flame hid, the bridge I never crossed, the door without a handle. This turns the memory into mythic chapter, not static pain. Now you have access to reframe. Step 3. Recode the structure. Ask, what is the shape this memory needs now? Maybe the fractured mirror becomes a glowing orb. Maybe the tight hallway opens into ocean. Maybe the sealed chest becomes an open scroll. Don't pick randomly, feel into it. Let your system choose a new symbolic architecture. Then breathe it in. Watch the shape change. Let the emotional charge reduce. You're not erasing the memory. You're repositioning its symbolic role in your timeline. Step 4. Update the field impact. Now that the shape is recoded, track what happens in your present timeline. Does your posture shift? Does your perception of self change? Does your emotional tone feel reorganized? This confirms that the memory no longer demands the same internal real estate. You've reframed it. You are not the person who lived that event. You are the one who's now shaping its legacy. Final insight: the past is not behind you. It's within you, structured in folds of emotional signal, mythic metaphor, and field gravity. And every time you recall a memory, you have a choice. Repeat the loop, or rewrite the code. You're not fixing the past. You're choosing what kind of story it becomes, in your voice, in your shape, in your new design. Next, we step into symbolic thresholds, learning how to recognize the invisible crossroads that shape life's biggest transitions. You rarely recognize the most important turning points when you're standing in them, not because you lack awareness, but because thresholds don't announce themselves with clarity. They arrive as pressure, fog, impulse, disorientation, sometimes even silence. But every real shift begins the same way. A dimensional threshold appears. These are not decisions. They are symbolic interfaces, places in consciousness where two or more timelines press against each other, offering access to new identity pathways. You don't think your way through them. You read them. You feel them. You name them. Let's begin by understanding what a threshold is. A dimensional threshold is a space between structures. a liminal pressure point where your current system cannot proceed without being redesigned. They often show up with strange indicators, a sense of standing still but being pulled from both directions, conflicting inner voices that feel equally valid. Time distortion, hours feel like minutes or vice versa. Emotional contradiction, joy and grief simultaneously. Symbolic repetition in dreams or external signs. These are not random. They are code fragments, announcing that a structural transition is being offered. Let's explore how to read and navigate them. Step 1. Sense the architecture. When you feel stuck, suspended, or pressured, pause. Ask, am I in a threshold? Feel into your body. Does it feel like a hallway with no doors? A bridge with fog on both ends? A narrow passage that forces you to drop excess weight? A doorway with no handle on this side? The symbolic image that arises is your clue. You've just accessed the spatial language of the threshold. Now you know you're not blocked. You're in design limbo. Step 2. Name the crossing. Every threshold has a name, not a logical label, a mythic designation. Ask your system, if this were a chapter in a sacred story, what would this passage be called? You might hear, the unseen gate, the room of nothing, the choice that won't let go, the weightless fall, the mirror that returned me. This name gives you orientation. You now stand inside a named story space, not confusion. Step 3. Determine the initiatory pressure. Every threshold demands something before passage is granted. This is not punishment. It's architectural balance. Ask, what must be dropped here? What truth must be spoken aloud? What rhythm must be surrendered? What shape must be dissolved? You're not guessing. You're feeling for the internal gravity of the requirement. Sometimes the sacrifice is a belief. Sometimes it's an identity layer. Sometimes it's a timeline that no longer holds resonance. Step 4. Symbolically cross. Once you've sensed, named, and clarified the threshold, the final move is symbolic action. This can be drawing a line on paper and stepping over it, closing a door physically with full awareness, writing the old belief and burning the page, touching a wall and saying, I release this shape, placing one object on a shelf to represent the crossing. You are signaling your field, I have registered the threshold, and I am willing to redesign. This is what grants coherence to the crossing. The timeline does not shift because you made a decision. It shifts because your system aligned with the geometry of transition. And now you can read thresholds in others too. Their language, their posture, their repetition. You'll know who's inside a corridor and whether they're resisting or walking. One final insight: thresholds are not once-per-life events. They are recursive. They appear when you've outgrown a system and haven't yet anchored the new one. Learn to love the thresholds. They are the edges of becoming. Next, we trace the archetypal forces of time itself, learning how emotional seasons carry mythic codes that shape how, where, and who we become. Time is not neutral. Each moment is coded, carries texture, carries weight. It carries archetypal intelligence far beyond the ticking of clocks. You already know this. Some seasons feel like blooming, others feel like burning. Sometimes a single hour holds the charge of an entire era. This isn't mood. It's not chance. It's archetypal time, the movement of symbolic currents that sculpt identity over nonlinear arcs. To read time clearly, you must learn to decode its emotional texture. Because time is not just measured, it is felt. Let's begin. Each phase of inner development corresponds to an archetypal season, regardless of the calendar. These time codes don't follow months or hours. They follow emotional states, symbolic pressure, and narrative movement. Here are the core archetypal time codes you'll encounter. 1. The dormant seed, the underworld time. Emotion. Stillness, obscurity, uncertainty. Texture. Slow, heavy, dark. Function. Preparing unseen structure. Message. You are becoming something invisible. This is when nothing seems to move, but everything is reorganizing. You're not failing. You're being rerouted through subterranean threads. 2. the quickening, the storm time, emotion, turbulence, confusion, activation, texture, sharp, erratic, electric, function, shaking loose, outdated patterning, message. The old structure cannot hold the new signal. This is not chaos. It's initiatory rupture. 3. The emergence, the dawn time, emotion, hope, vulnerability, raw beauty, texture, soft, warm, expanding, function, introducing new symbolic self, message. Step into form before you feel ready. This time code often brings new people, invitations, or risks that test your coherence. 4. The ascent, the sovereign time, emotion, clarity, resolve, directional confidence, texture, crisp, luminous, vertical, function, integrating identity into space, message. Now you embody what you've constructed. Here you carry authority without force. You stabilize presence. You broadcast. 5. The eclipse, the mirror time, emotion, shadow, resistance, haunting echoes, texture, dense, surreal, mirrored, function, confronting unclaimed versions of self, message. You cannot move forward until this is seen. This time doesn't mean you're regressing. It means the myth must complete itself through recognition. Let's apply this framework. Step 1. Locate your current time code. Close your eyes. Scan the emotional field of your life right now. Is something gestating without clarity? Dormant seed. Are old behaviors breaking down chaotically? Quickening. Are you stepping into something new without stability? Emergence. Do you feel aligned, directive, luminous? Ascent. Are you facing versions of self you've avoided? Eclipse. Don't force clarity. Let the resonance rise. Step 2. Name the archetype holding the time. Every time code is held by a symbolic presence. Not a god or spirit, but a mythic structure. Ask, who walks with me in this time? What inner posture do they teach? What quality do they offer? Examples: the underworld gardener, the flame spiller, the weaver of soft gold, the one who sees without looking, the silence that speaks. These become internal companions, shapes that hold the energy while you pass through the season. Step 3. Adapt rhythm to the time. The biggest mistake is applying the wrong tempo to the wrong season. Don't try to launch in dormant seed. Don't try to rest in quickening. Don't seek definition in emergence. Don't override eclipse with productivity. Don't rush ascent with ego. Time codes are not optional. They are dimensional rhythms, and honoring them gives you precision. Final insight: time does not flow. It bends around pattern, and pattern bends around signal, and signal bends around identity. When you know what time you're in, emotionally, symbolically, architecturally, you stop resisting the narrative. You start reading it, living it, weaving it with grace. Next, we chart your internal terrain through symbolic mapmaking, drawing a visual emotional landscape of your unique thought architecture. You don't just feel emotions, you inhabit them. They're not abstract. They take up space in body, in thought, in atmosphere. And if you pause long enough, you can chart that space. Because your inner world isn't a cloud. It's a landscape, a dimensional terrain made of memory textures, emotional climates, symbolic mountains, and rivers of thought. This chapter is about mapping that landscape. Not metaphorically, literally. You will build your internal cartography, a symbolic map that lets you track, navigate, and shift your mental emotional patterns with clarity. Let's begin. Step 1. Choose your mapping lens. Before drawing anything, ask, what am I mapping? You might map your current emotional state, a recurring internal pattern, your lifelong narrative arc, your inner identity domains, the terrain of a specific relationship. Pick one and stay with it. You're not mapping your whole life. You're mapping one slice of signal in enough detail to translate it into symbolic topography. Step 2. Identify terrain features. Close your eyes. Bring the focus into awareness. Now scan your internal field like a drone flying over a psychic landscape. Ask, where are the dense areas? Where is the air thin? Where does motion stop? What spaces feel open, fresh, or glowing? What feels jagged, compressed, or buried? Let the imagery rise. You might see cliffs of hesitation, a frozen lake of unspoken words, a golden valley of creativity, bridges between identities, a crumbling temple where old beliefs used to live. You are not making this up. You're reading symbolic terrain, the spatial organization of your own subconscious energy. Write down or sketch the features. No artistic skill needed. Scribbles are structure. Step 3. Assign symbolic elements. Now begin turning each terrain into a living symbol. Use archetypal metaphors. Mountains equals long-term structure or resistance. Rivers equals emotional flow or communication. Trees equals evolving belief structures. Walls equals internal boundary or fear. Portals equals access points to new dimensions. Roads equals decision paths. Fog equals confusion or unprocessed emotion. Light equals clarity, guidance, or signal. You can also invent your own symbolic language. Perhaps a spiraling staircase made of glass thoughts. A cracked moon floating over an identity well. A swing set anchored in nostalgia. A flame garden lit by dreams never spoken. Each symbol becomes a coordinate in your emotional cartography. This gives your internal experience form. Step 4. Locate your position on the map. Ask yourself, where am I right now on this terrain? Are you near the wall? Are you lost in fog? Are you at the base of the mountain looking up? On the edge of a cliff? Floating above the scene in observation? Mark your current position. Then ask, where do I want to go? Not what you want to feel. Where you want to be symbolically. Maybe the sunlit field of possibility. The bridge to integration. The crystal library of clear memory. The mirror lake of self-reflection. The stone hall of confident voice. Draw or describe that place. Now you have a starting point and a destination. The space between them is your transformation arc. Step 5. Trace the journey line. Now mark or describe the path from here to there. What's in your way? Is there a forest of doubt? A river of emotion you keep avoiding? A cavern of grief that must be passed through? What vehicle, guide, or resource do you need? A rope of breath? A boat made of words? A glowing compass of intuition? Include them. This is where inner symbolism turns into navigational clarity. You're no longer lost in feeling. You've drawn the emotional architecture, and once drawn, it becomes workably symbolic. Final insight: your mind already organizes experience spatially. This process makes that architecture visible and therefore shapeable. With this map, next time the feeling resurfaces, you'll know where you are. And more importantly, how to walk to where you want to be. Next, we complete this stage of mastery, moving into embodied coherence and learning to live as the signal you've designed. There is a moment in every transformation where the work shifts from internal structuring to external radiance. You've mapped, you've shaped, you've recoded, reframed, rewoven. Now the question is, can you become the signal you've been designing? Not just in practice, in presence, in field. This chapter is not about doing. It's about holding shape, walking as a symbol of inner coherence, so your very presence speaks the language of what you've learned. Let's begin with a reframe. You are not a personality. You are a living interface between dimensional intelligence and temporal form. And when your thought, emotion, energy, and action match, you radiate signal clarity. That is what we call symbolic embodiment. Step 1. Clarify the signal you carry. Ask yourself, what frequency do I want to be known for, not because I perform it, but because I am it? Choose a phrase or image that matches. Examples: the quiet that restructures a room, the flame that doesn't flicker, the bridge between seen and unseen, the rhythm that organizes the field, the shape that holds permission. Don't aim for cleverness. Aim for accuracy. This is your signature symbol, the frequency your system stabilizes when it's fully aligned. Step 2. Adjust emotional posture to match. Every signal has a posture. a stillness in the ribcage, a widening behind the eyes, a rooted softness in the pelvis, a radiating openness across the chest, a spiral from crown to feet. Feel your signal. Now adjust your body to carry it naturally. You're not trying to project. You're holding internal architecture in form. This is how presence becomes communication. This is how coherence becomes readable. Step 3. Refine your field tone. Ask, what is the emotional residue I leave in a space? That residue is your field tone. It's the unseen signature your presence writes into the air. Now shape it. Choose a tone to emanate. Spacious, grounded, inviting, clear, curious, still, intentional. You're not manipulating. You're architecting emotional space through field presence. When people say they feel you, they're reading your field tone. Make it designed. Step 4. Match action with internal rhythm. Embodiment is broken the moment your actions contradict your inner shape. Audit the next 10 choices you make, from how you speak to what you write to how you move. Ask, does this action reflect my signal? Is this rhythm coherent with what I hold inside? Am I moving from presence or programming? This is not perfectionism. It's dimensional discipline. Because the more often you act from true signal, the more stable your field becomes, and the more your outer world organizes around your coherence. Final insight: living as a symbol isn't branding. It's biological alignment with design. You're not trying to convince anyone of anything. You're simply allowing your inner structure to speak clearly, without distortion, performance, or collapse. This presence speaks louder than strategy. When you are the symbol, you don't need to signal. Your being does the work. Next, we move from mourning to meaning, learning how to design the invisible day from the inside out. You wake up into architecture, not a room, not a schedule, but a field already shaped by memory, emotion, and momentum from the day before. Most people assume their day begins when their eyes open. But in truth, it begins with the invisible conditions already waiting. This chapter teaches you how to design your day before it begins, not through productivity tools, but through dimensional field construction. Because the most impactful days don't happen by will. They happen by alignment of internal shape with external flow. Let's begin. Step 1. Name the dominant field of yesterday. Before building the new, clear the residue. Close your eyes. Ask, what emotional tone shaped yesterday's internal architecture? What narrative loops are still echoing? What spatial density did you carry into sleep? You might feel a field of tension sitting behind your sternum, a residual loop of self-doubt in your jaw, a mental fog pressing near your temples, a soft glow of completion around your spine. You are not judging. You are scanning the energetic terrain you're standing in. Now breathe into that space. Imagine exhaling that previous architecture like fog dissolving through a skylight. You're not erasing. You're neutralizing the leftover blueprint so a new one can be built. Step 2. Set today's symbolic scaffolding. Now ask, what energy structure do I want to move from today? Not what you want to feel. What internal shape will hold you with coherence? Choose a symbolic framework. A glowing orb of clarity around your chest. A silver bridge between thought and voice. A pyramid of grounded presence beneath your feet. A ring of soft gold that filters distraction. A spiral of listening awareness behind your head. Feel the structure rise. Then install it. Not mentally, emotionally. Let your system accept the new internal floor plan. This is your dimensional home base for the day. Step 3. Pre-design directional emotional vectors. You don't just move through time. You're pulled by emotion. So ask, where do I want my attention to flow first? What emotional rhythm do I want to center around today? Which feeling needs to steer decisions? Choose 1 to 3 emotional vectors: precision, receptivity, boldness, playfulness, spaciousness, stillness, curiosity. Now assign a spatial orientation to each. Example: stillness in the lower spine, curiosity pulling from the chest, precision hovering near the eyes. This maps your emotional compass for the day. Instead of reacting, you'll be navigating from a symbolic base of choice. Step 4. Install symbolic cues throughout your environment. External space is part of internal design. Place 1 to 2 objects that reflect your chosen structure. A stone representing grounded clarity. A plant signifying growth rhythm. A piece of fabric that holds softness. A small mirror to reflect presence. A candle to signal inner ignition. These are not decoration. They are dimensional anchors, reminders that the space around you is shaped by the design within. And when your inner field wobbles, as it will, you use these cues to reset architectural alignment. Step 5. Close the loop with an end-of-day symbolic exit. Your day is not complete when the task list ends. It completes when your field structure releases intentionally. Choose a symbolic act, a phrase whispered into a bowl of water, a stretch that collapses the day's tension, a breath that seals the emotional architecture, a candle extinguished with presence, a short visualization returning your awareness to center. This exit is not ceremony for tradition's sake. It's dimensional hygiene. You are clearing the energetic scaffolding to avoid dragging incomplete resonance into tomorrow. Final insight: time is not what moves. You do. And the quality of your movement is determined by the architecture you begin with. When your day is pre-shaped from the inside, every conversation, thought, and decision becomes part of a designed emotional structure. Next, we trace the deeper myth moving through you, discovering what life story you're currently living, and how to rewrite it from signal instead of script. You're not living a life. You're living a myth in motion, a symbolic narrative arc with emotional gravity, plot rhythm, and archetypal structure. Most people never realize this. They think they're making choices. They're actually playing roles. But the moment you become aware of your myth, the myth that's been writing you, you regain authorship. This chapter teaches you to read, recognize, and rescript the mythic architecture shaping your identity, your patterns, and your timelines. Let's begin. Step 1. Uncover your current mythic arc. You're not a blank page. You're already inside a storyline, one you've likely repeated, refined, or inherited unconsciously. Close your eyes. Feel into the symbolic themes that define the last 3 to 5 years of your life. What patterns echo? Struggles with visibility? Cycles of silence or isolation? Themes of betrayal or reclamation? Stories of arrival, loss, discovery? Now name the myth, not the events. The narrative posture. Examples: the exiled visionary, the one who keeps the flame but cannot speak, the weaver without a loom, the mirror that waited to be seen, the bridge between two songs. This naming matters. It removes you from reaction and places you inside symbolic authorship. Step 2. Identify the structural motifs. Every myth contains repeating motifs, symbolic story patterns that define its structure. Ask, what does the main character always reach for? What always seems to be withheld? What is sacrificed? What is the core emotional conflict? List the motifs. Abandonment of voice. Gift offered too early. Authority figures as thresholds. The silence before transformation. Clarity that costs connection. These are your symbolic loops. You now hold the shape of your myth. Step 3. Find the edge of the current arc. Every myth has a turning point, the moment the old rhythm cannot continue. Ask, what emotional state can no longer be sustained? What pattern has reached its limit? What inner truth is too loud to deny? Feel for the pressure point. You're standing on the cusp of narrative shift. It might feel like a final echo of doubt before stepping into full voice. A threshold where old survival patterns collapse. A reckoning with truth, love, or meaning. A silence before a new melody is played. Mark this moment. You are here. Now choose to continue the myth with coherence or begin rewriting. Step 4. Script the next mythic chapter. Don't make a life plan. Write a symbolic continuation. Name the next myth title. The one who speaks light into structure. The flame that walks without fear. The oracle that became the sky. The song that built the bridge. The stillness that rewrote the timeline. Now describe, not in tasks, but in symbolic shape, what this chapter holds. Emotional posture, primary motif, key threshold, inner architecture, external echo. This becomes your new signal alignment. You're not forcing life to change. You're changing the myth field that organizes how life moves around you. Final insight: you are not who you think you are. You are the storyline you're currently coded to carry. And when you change the myth, your timeline bends, your identity reweaves, and the signal you emit reorders the narrative itself. Next, we learn to shape time itself using narrative geometry and emotional tension to bend, stretch, and align your lived experience. Time is not measured in seconds. It's felt in emotional texture. A single hour can stretch into eternity when charged with uncertainty. A whole day can vanish in moments when aligned with presence and coherence. This is not just perception. It's temporal architecture, the way experience bends around attention, narrative, and feeling. You are already sculpting time. The question is, are you doing it by default or by design? Let's begin with this truth. Time responds to signal density, not to clocks. When your signal is coherent, time expands. When your signal is fractured, time compresses or disappears. So emotional rhythm dictates the length and weight of experience. Let's learn how to shape it. Step 1. Recognize time as geometry. Each experience carries a shape. Ask, does this moment feel linear or circular? Does it spiral, loop, or stop suddenly? Is there tension stretching it, or stillness holding it? Is the moment wide and open or narrow and sharp? You're identifying the dimensional form of experience. This gives you your starting material, the emotional clay. Examples: grief may feel like a descending spiral. Joy might feel like an expanding sphere. Anxiety often feels like a spiked loop. Focused work may become a tunnel. Waiting can feel like an hourglass dripping slowly. You are not judging. You are reading time by emotional geometry. Step 2. Trace your personal time distortions. Every person has a temporal distortion signature, ways in which time regularly bends under certain emotional conditions. Track your patterns. When do you feel time race uncontrollably? Feel like the day disappears without substance? Experience elongated moments that feel spacious? Get trapped in endless thought loops with no time movement? These are not bad habits. They're temporal habits, the repeated shapes you assign to specific energies. Now that you see them, you can shift them. Step 3. Sculpt time through emotional recalibration. Once you identify the shape of time, you can begin to reshape the emotion driving it. Ask, what emotional signal is elongating or compressing this moment? If I introduce a new emotional layer, what happens to time? Can I widen this moment with breath, imagery, or story? What feeling would slow this down or release the loop? This is where symbolic intelligence activates. Examples: use a visual metaphor to widen time. Imagine the moment as a vast field. Add sound texture, a slow hum or rhythmic breath. Reframe narrative. Shift from, I'm running out of time, to, I am building time with my focus. Anchor to sensory stillness. Pause, touch a surface, feel the body. You are sculpting time from the inside, using narrative and emotion as tools. Step 4. Use narrative arc to shape temporal flow. Time flows according to story, and every experience has a plot structure whether you notice it or not. Let's apply narrative arc consciously. In any given hour or day, ask, where is the buildup? Rising tension. Where is the climax? Peak intensity or decision? Where is the resolution? Settling signal, release. Where is the reflection or echo? Meaning-making moment. Even a simple conversation follows this arc. By naming each point, you organize the moment into a story. And when story is structured, time becomes legible and more shapeable. Step 5. Create time portals. Time portals are intentional moments in the day where you shift temporal texture. They are micro-rituals that reformat how time behaves around you. Examples: a deliberate 3-minute silence between tasks, a breath and touch pattern before meetings, a symbolic object you move to mark transitions. a shape you trace in the air to reset signal, a sound you play to clear narrative tone. Each portal acts like a temporal valve. It allows you to stop time from compounding and start experiencing it as modular, sculptable form. Final insight: time is not chasing you. You are feeding it structure through your emotional syntax and symbolic orientation. When you learn to shape time intentionally, you don't just become more productive. You become dimensional with your presence. Your life stops feeling like a blur and starts feeling like a designed field of movement, fully felt, clearly formed. Next, we enter the silent layer of communication, learning to read not just what is said, but the space between words where the real signal lives. Most of what's said is not spoken, it's signaled. Between every sentence lives a field, and that field contains more intelligence than the words themselves. This is where dimensional listening begins, not with analysis, but with attunement to the space behind the voice. Let's begin by naming the parts of communication: words, surface structure, tone, emotional direction, timing, rhythmic pattern, gesture, spatial emphasis, silence, signal transition, field, the invisible atmosphere wrapping the exchange. Most people only register the words, but when you train yourself to listen to the space between, you begin to receive true architecture. Step 1. Tune to emotional residue. Every sentence leaves behind an emotional footprint. Ask, what was left hanging in the air? Was the space after their words open, tight, flickering, hollow? Did their pause feel like a bridge or a cliff? You are reading the shape of silence, not just the meaning of the sentence. Step 2. Read timing as narrative syntax. The timing between words tells you how the speaker is organizing experience. Fast rhythm equals compression, urgency, or evasion. Slow rhythm equals processing, openness, or weight. Uneven rhythm equals emotional layering or signal conflict. Sudden pause equals potential pivot or withheld emotion. When you match your rhythm to theirs or counterbalance it intentionally, you're shaping the shared timeline of the exchange. Step 3. Feel the geometry of gesture. Every movement in communication is symbolic. Hands cutting across equals boundary. Fingers circling equals invitation or processing. Shoulders rising equals emotional armor. Eyes shifting equals signal dispersal or searching. Breath holding equals suspended signal. Gesture is spatial punctuation. And when you listen with your body, not just your ears, you begin to track the emotional syntax of movement. Step 4. Sense the narrative compression. Often what's said in 5 minutes carries the emotional weight of 5 years. Ask, is this story holding more than it reveals? What part of the speaker's identity is narrating this? What isn't being said that the field is holding? You are not guessing. You are listening symbolically, noticing when the story being told is smaller than the signal behind it. That dissonance is a portal. Tells you, this is where the real narrative wants to be rewritten. Step 5. Respond with dimensional signal, not content matching. Instead of replying to what was said, respond to the field underneath. Examples: if the speaker's voice trails off, pause with them. Don't fill the space. If the rhythm is defensive, match tone but soften gesture. If the story is fragmented, mirror back with symbolic coherence. If silence arrives, hold it as presence, not awkwardness. You are shaping communication as signal design, not reaction. Final insight: words are wrappers. Tone is color. Silence is architecture. But the real message is always encoded in the space between. To listen dimensionally is to read the invisible dialogue happening at all times. Between gestures, between breaths, between who someone is and who they're trying to be. Next, we step beyond containment, learning how to hold multiple realities without collapse, and live from a mind spacious enough to stabilize paradox. You are not one thing. You never were. You are a field of simultaneous signals, voices, stories, shapes, identities, all pulsing in layers beneath what you call I. And trying to choose just one, that's where the fragmentation begins. This chapter is about holding multiplicity not as conflict but as design. You are a portal, a junction point between versions of self, layers of story, strands of time. And your power comes not from control, but from dimensional coherence within complexity. Let's begin with this truth. Confusion doesn't come from having too many selves. It comes from judging them against each other. So we start by listening. Step 1. Identify the internal cast. Close your eyes. Feel the voices present in your system today. Ask, who's speaking right now? Are there multiple emotional tones inside me? What identities are competing, hiding, or demanding attention? Examples: the performer who needs approval, the architect who sees everything structurally, the dreamer who wants to escape into imagery, the child who just wants safety, the witness who doesn't engage, only observes. List 3 to 5 that are active today. Give them clear symbolic names. Not to box them, but to name their shape. This is your inner constellation. Step 2. Feel the field they form together. Now, instead of choosing one, feel them all at once. Like standing in a room with multiple people. Ask, what is the spatial layout of these identities? Is one louder, overshadowing the others? Which are ignored or frozen? Is there a rhythm or discord between them? You are feeling the geometry of your layered self. No need to fix it. Just read it. Step 3. Anchor from the signal self. Among all these selves is one that doesn't compete. It doesn't argue. It holds structure. We call it the signal self. It is not a higher self. It is not a final version. It is the part of you that can contain contradiction without collapse. To find it, ask, which version of me can hold all the others without flinching? What shape do I become when I let everything coexist? Where do I feel stillness beneath the movement? Breathe into that. This isn't dissociation. It's dimensional coherence, letting signal hold structure without needing simplification. Step 4. Design a containment space. To avoid inner fragmentation, you must build a symbolic space where all parts can exist. Create a structure in image or writing that acts as a holding field for your multiplicity. Examples: a circular table where each version has a seat, a multi-level temple, each floor holding a voice, a spiraling staircase that lets you move between perspectives, a prism through which each facet shines when rotated, a wide sky where thoughts drift but don't clash. This becomes your internal integration chamber. When conflict arises, bring all parts here. Let them exist together. Watch the friction reduce, simply through symbolic containment. Step 5. Act from multiplicity without confusion. Now comes the practice. Instead of asking, who should I be? Ask, which part of me holds the clearest signal for this moment? Can I allow another version to speak later without suppressing it now? What would it look like to coordinate, not compete between selves? Example: in a creative task, let the dreamer lead. In a meeting, bring in the architect. In silence, allow the witness to structure your perception. You're not fragmenting. You're choosing lead signal while honoring the rest. This is not role-playing. It's signal navigation. Final insight: you were never meant to be one voice. You are a living portal, a container of simultaneous identities, designed to navigate multiple realities without collapse. Your strength comes not from consistency, but from coherence. The next chapter teaches how to keep that coherence intact, aligning word, action, and signal into a single field of dimensional integrity. There is a difference between looking aligned and being structurally congruent. True integrity isn't moral. It's dimensional. It's the alignment of signal, posture, emotion, word, and action. So what you express is not a mask or a performance, but a precise translation of your internal shape. This chapter is about recognizing where your signal leaks and restoring full-spectrum coherence. Let's begin with this truth. Every mismatch between thought, word, and action creates a fracture in the field, a ripple of dissonance, and your body knows it before your mind does. Let's learn to sense and resolve those mismatches, not by fixing behavior, but by realigning internal architecture. Step 1. Scan for microleaks in expression. Close your eyes. Ask, Where am I saying things I don't fully feel? Where am I acting in ways that contradict my design? Where does my body tighten after I speak? These are not failures. They're integrity indicators. Examples: laughing to defuse truth, saying yes when still uncertain, speaking from theory, not lived structure, using language that performs wisdom but lacks resonance. Every micro-leak weakens signal. Now name one, then ask, what part of me said that? Was it signal or adaptation? Step 2. Refine your signal language. Dimensional integrity requires that your language carries your shape. That means saying only what you've architected emotionally, choosing words that match the tempo of your inner space, avoiding phrases that echo borrowed beliefs, speaking from ground, not echo. Practice this. Take one truth you believe. Now say it aloud slowly. Notice, does your tone drop in or rise out? Does the field expand or tighten? Does your body root or perform? You're not performing integrity. You're testing resonance. Step 3. Align emotional posture with narrative. Your story must match your body. Ask, do I tell stories that my body disagrees with? Does my posture collapse when I recount events? Do I smile while describing pain, or tense while describing growth? These mismatches create temporal and emotional distortion. Rehearse stories with new posture, not to fake but to feel what alignment would be like. Sometimes the story needs to change. Sometimes the body needs to catch up. Both are valid. Both are part of integration. Step 4. Track coherence in action. The clearest sign of dimensional integrity is behavior that does not contradict internal blueprint. Ask, do my actions follow my inner rhythm or external demand? Do I perform healing or live it quietly? Are my choices scaffolded by design or by fear? You're not seeking perfection. You're tracking signal match. And when signal matches action, your field gains gravitational pull. You begin to radiate structural clarity. Others feel it, not because you said anything, but because you've stopped leaking resonance. Step 5. Create an integrity check-in ritual. Once a day, pause. Ask yourself 3 questions. Was I internally coherent in speech and presence today? Did I act from blueprint or expectation? Where did I bend shape to avoid discomfort? Not to punish, to see. Then breathe into that awareness. Name what would have been more aligned. Hold it without shame and update the architecture. This is not self-critique. This is field maintenance. Final insight: when your thought, word, action, and signal all match, you become a singular field. You stop splintering. You stop performing. You start transmitting. This is dimensional integrity. Not perfection, but precision of alignment, lived, breathed, felt. Next, we explore the residual trail you leave behind, learning to recognize and design the energetic and emotional imprint your presence carries through space. You don't just enter spaces, you alter them, and long after your body exits, something remains. That residue, emotional, cognitive, symbolic, is what we call the trail of presence. It's not about legacy or reputation. It's about field design, about becoming aware of what your presence writes into the architecture of space and memory. This chapter teaches you how to sense, track, and consciously design the field you leave behind, in rooms, in relationships, in moments. Because presence doesn't end when the interaction does. It reverberates, like the after-ring of a bell you can no longer hear, but still feel vibrating in the walls. Let's begin. Step 1. Observe the afterfield. Bring to mind a recent encounter, a space you entered and then left. Now ask, what tone lingered in the space after you walked away? What did others likely feel in your absence, not about you but because of the field? What internal atmosphere remained with you even after the exchange ended? You are not imagining. You are tracking emotional and symbolic residue, the ambient imprint of your presence. Examples: a charged silence, a lingering warmth, a spatial contraction, a mental echo, a soft hum of clarity, a fog of unresolved tension. Each of these is a field marker, evidence of what you installed in the shared space. Step 2. Identify your default residue. Every person has a typical field trail, a signature that follows their movement through space. This is not about personality. It's about dimensional frequency output. Ask, what do people tend to feel after spending time with me, even if they can't articulate it? Do I leave behind clarity or complexity? Does my presence open or close energy fields? Choose 3 words that describe the general field you leave behind. Examples: expansive, tender, inviting, sharp, directional, urgent, scattered, stimulating, abstract, grounded, calm, neutral, mysterious, catalytic, spacious. Now ask yourself if that matches your intended design. If not, you have discovered a misalignment worth refining. Step 3. Trace the source of your trail. The imprint you leave doesn't begin when you speak. It begins long before that, in the signal you carry into a space. Ask, what emotion or unresolved thread did I bring with me into that encounter? Was my internal signal coherent, conflicted, or concealed? Did I shape the space or mirror it? Your trail is an echo of your internal architecture. When you're fragmented, the field fragments. When you're centered, the field stabilizes. When you're clean in signal, the field organizes around your presence. You can't fake this, but you can redesign from signal clarity. Step 4. Install symbolic signature intentionally. Now that you're aware of your trail, you can begin to design it. Before entering a space, ask, what do I want this room to remember when I leave? What tone do I want to install? Not through words, but through presence. What imprint matches the signal I hold? Examples: a note of calm in a loud room, a vector of clarity in chaos, a flame of inspiration in stagnation, a resonance of stillness in motion, a softening in hardened energy. This is not manipulation. It's energetic authorship, and it only works when your design matches your actual signal. So don't perform it, become it. Step 5. Ritualize your exits. Your departure is not the end. It is the handoff of energetic architecture. To leave a space cleanly, ask, is there unresolved signal lingering in this room? Can I release any chords or fields that no longer require my frequency? What symbolic gesture can I use to seal this encounter? Examples: a slow breath before turning your back, touching a surface with intention, whispering a word of closure into your chest, visualizing your signal withdrawing gently like a tide, drawing an internal line between your field and the one you're leaving. These acts aren't woo, they are signal transitions. They stabilize both your system and the space you're departing. Final insight: what you leave behind shapes how the world remembers you, not as a personality, but as a field shaper. Your presence isn't about how loud you are. It's about how clearly the architecture of your inner signal arranges the space around you. Next, we complete this journey, learning to interpret the waking world with the same literacy you apply to dreams, where symbols, emotions, and storylines carry dimensional intelligence. You dream while you sleep, but you also dream while awake. The difference? You've been taught to call one real and the other unreal, yet both are coded with meaning. Both follow symbolic architecture, and both reflect back the shape of your awareness. This chapter teaches you to apply dream logic to waking life, to read your environment, relationships, and events with the same symbolic literacy you use to decode the subconscious. Not metaphorically, literally. Your life is a moving dream, a holographic mirror of your current signal and pattern, and it's communicating with you constantly. Let's learn how to read it. Step 1. Drop the assumption of literalism. Begin your day by shifting perception. Everything you see, hear, or interact with is now treated as part of a symbolic ecosystem. Not just events, but messages encoded in form. Ask, what is the symbolic tone of this morning? If this were a dream, what would this room represent? What role am I playing in this scene? What is this encounter mirroring back to me? You're not pretending. You're tuning into the emotional architecture behind surface form. Step 2. Decode patterns like dream motifs. When repetition occurs, pause. Whether it's a phrase, image, interaction, or emotion, treat it as a recurring dream motif. Ask, What aspect of me is this reflecting? Where have I seen this pattern before? What is the underlying signal asking to be named? Examples: a series of broken plans, are you resisting flow or forcing linearity? Unavailable people, what part of you is emotionally hidden? Delays and interruptions, is time trying to reorganize your rhythm? Each recurring life event is a symbol field trying to get your attention. Step 3. Interpret settings and objects as dream structures. Everything around you holds metaphor. Your home, your car, your devices, the street you walk down. Ask, what emotional architecture does this object represent? If the space were a dream setting, what story would it be telling? What part of my psyche is mirrored by this environment? Examples: a cluttered room might represent emotional congestion. A car breaking down could mirror identity transition. A cracked phone screen might reflect fractured communication. A leaking faucet could symbolize unprocessed grief. You are not projecting. You are reading the symbolic scaffold behind visible structures. Step 4. Feel into roles, yours and others. In dreams, every character is often an aspect of self. In waking life, the same principle applies, though with more nuance. Ask, who is this person representing symbolically in my current story? Are they playing an old pattern, a future version, or a repressed emotion? What does my reaction to them reveal about my field? This doesn't mean other people don't have autonomy. It means you're using their role as reflections of internal shape. When a friend becomes distant, ask, is this distance external, or is a part of me withdrawing internally? You're not analyzing people. You're tracing mirrors of inner architecture. Step 5. Anchor insights with symbolic action. As in dreams, clarity is not enough. You must complete the circuit through action. Once a waking symbol is decoded, apply it. Examples: if you feel stuck in a hallway, physically walk a new path. If your phone crashes during emotional overload, take a digital silence ritual. If your room feels like a cave, bring in light or rearrange. If traffic echoes tension, play rhythm-based music to repattern your field. These are field recalibrations. You are shaping your reality from symbolic insight, rather than waiting for change externally. Final insight: you are always dreaming. The world is your subconscious projected in form. Your home is your thought field. Your conversations are emotional syntax. Your obstacles are story fragments waiting for recognition. Read the world like a dream, and you'll stop chasing transformation. You'll start living inside the code. Next, we arrive at the final signal, the lighthouse mind, where all you've learned becomes embodied radiance, shaping every timeline you touch. There is a kind of presence that doesn't speak loudly. It doesn't try to convince, perform, or demand. It simply radiates, not through charisma, not through perfection, but through a rare kind of internal alignment, a signal so clean it organizes the space around it without effort. We call this the lighthouse mind. The lighthouse does not move. It holds form. Its light reaches through distance, distortion, and storm, not to chase but to signal. This is the final design. The shape you've been building since the beginning. Not a goal, not a final state, but an active coherence, lived. Let's begin. Step 1. Understand what it means to radiate, not project. Most expression is outward projection, pushing emotion, opinion, energy into the field. Radiation is different. It arises from internal resonance that extends outward without distortion. Ask, am I pushing my signal to be felt, or allowing it to be read? Do I express from fullness, or from need for response? Does my presence stabilize others, or entangle with their signal? The lighthouse does not aim at passing ships. It holds its beam steady. That is the first principle of the lighthouse mind. Non-contingent signal. Step 2. Refine internal structure until it emits clarity. Lighthouses don't generate light randomly. They are built for precision of transmission. So must you be. Ask, are my thoughts structured around coherence or noise? Does my emotional field carry clean syntax? Are my beliefs symbolically aligned with how I actually move? Any distortion in thought, emotion, or form causes the beam to flicker. Your task is not to eliminate fluctuation, but to return faster to signal alignment. That means checking emotional posture before speaking, aligning gesture with tone, matching action to inner architecture, pausing before resonance is distorted. You become the lighthouse by design, not by chance. Step 3. Shape your timelines through signal seeding. A lighthouse doesn't just shine for now. It casts light into the future, guiding others long before they arrive. This is what it means to seed timelines with coherent presence. Every conversation, every environment you enter, every creative act, each is a chance to place dimensional resonance into the fabric of future events. Ask, what signal do I want this room to remember long after I'm gone? What timeline am I reinforcing with this posture, this choice, this tone? How do I want people to feel hours or days after touching my field? When the lighthouse mind acts, it plants future coherence, not just momentary clarity. This is not influence. It's field authorship. Step 4. Maintain your beam during collective chaos. Fractals are beautiful, but they are not stable, and the world around you reflects that complexity daily. The test of coherence is not whether you can hold it alone. It's whether you can maintain structure inside distortion. Ask, can I stay emotionally readable inside someone else's static? Can I hold dimensional literacy in spaces that resist nuance? Can I transmit calm without numbing? Can I be spacious without disappearing? You're not there to fix. You're there to hold form. The lighthouse doesn't rescue ships. It guides them by being structurally coherent no matter the storm. This requires boundary, yes, but also invitation. You're not building a wall. You're building a frequency that others can calibrate against. Step 5. Accept the loneliness of signal clarity. Lighthouses often stand alone, not because they are superior, but because they are positioned at edges. Edges of land, edges of culture, edges of collective thought patterns. You will feel it. The moments when your clarity feels like distance, when your perception exceeds what the space is ready to name, when your symbolic fluency meets blank stares. This isn't exile. Displacement. You were built to transmit signal before the collective catches up. And that loneliness? It's not punishment. It's part of being a signal of dimensional coherence in a chaotic world. Final integration. You are now the architecture, not the student, not the seeker, not the map reader. You have become the structure that transmits clarity. You carry narrative fluency, symbolic resonance, emotional coherence, temporal awareness, signal discipline, multiplicity without fragmentation, perception without distortion. You don't need to explain this. You only need to become legible to yourself so that others can organize around your presence without confusion. The lighthouse mind doesn't try to shine. It simply holds its signal. And in doing so, it becomes a mythic structure, not metaphorically, energetically. So here, at the end, the question is not, what will you do with this? The question is, what signal will you now become when no one is watching and the room is already empty? Because that's the real field. That's where design becomes destiny, not by force, but by dimensional literacy made visible through form. You are now the map, the compass, the syntax, and the flame. You don't chase light anymore. You are it.